Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to your favorite sports podcast that dominates your Saturday morning/afternoon affairs, depending on when we go. Although I guess technically noon starts at 12 p.m. Welcome back to the podcast that plans out their dinner plans a year or maybe even 18 to 20 years in advance, depending on, schedules. We're all adults here. We have to plan time out. At least I like to think so. Welcome back to the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. And ladies and gentlemen, the NFL season might be gone. The NFL offseason hasn't started yet, but we're not going away anytime soon. Welcome back to the show. We got plenty to talk about today. But before we go to that, as someone's phone is going off in the background, come on, lads. We got to turn down that sound. I'm joined by my usual compatriots of chaos with me. First off on the screen with me to my, is he on my left or my right? I always forget with StreamYard. Justin Zucker. Justin, how we doing, brother? I said it before the show, but I love the cut, brother.
Thank you. It's a little messy right now, but it was desperately needed. So
messy is the best. Like, come on now. Like the messier looks the better. Messi is also the best in terms of soccer, but the same that kind of football is the different kind of football. It's the American football. And looking at Justin, you think that piece of paper is blank, or do you think it just has random scribble scrabble on it? Podfather Rick is down there.
Yeah, can I have the Sandoval au gratin, please, with the extra little mustard on the side? Thank you very much. Oh, hey guys, what's going on? We're talking about menus. I was getting a little hungry there. All three of us got haircuts at the same week. It seems like, yeah. So we're fresh on the scene and we're ready to get into our off season in style, I guess. So it works.
I mean, the show is always in style. I mean, it's only right that we coordinated all getting haircuts at once. We had no idea that this was going to happen. Justin said that. It's ironic. Justin said he got his right after the show last week. For anyone that watched last week's episode, I got mine this morning, so this worked out. And Rick split the difference between us.
I was a Thursday cut. It was just one of the things where it needed to be done, and I just did the rest of the beard a little bit this morning as well. So nice, worked out in my favor. Yeah,
nice, perfect. So freshly trimmed, fresh looking boys. The old season is over. Our fresh new season is just about to begin. So like I said at the very top in the intro, last week was the Super Bowl review show. You got Rick's account of it via a video. You got me and Justin talking about it. You got everything you wanted to know about last week's games. The last game of the season, it's done. The superb owl of last season is finished. We are now on the road to Super Bowl. I want to say it's 58. Super Bowl 58. The road starts now. Yes, even at this point, you already got to start thinking about next season. But before we get that far in, we have to actually go through the offseason in and of itself. I have a list of important offseason dates here that we're just going to quickly run through. That it's going to set the tone for a little bit of what we're going to talk about, but mainly for future episodes throughout this spring and the early portions of the summer before we eventually get to next season. But again, I'm looking way too far down the line there. So let me start with these dates, and then we can really get the show on the road. Because, ladies and gentlemen, hold on. Let's take a step back real quick. We have games. Don't worry. We got to set the stage for the people. We got to set up what's important, what's happening. And so with that being said, forget the dates. The games are more important because Justin is a bag of fun. He's the gameskeeper of the show. So Justin, let's begin the affair.
All right. So Patrick Mahomes just became the regular season MVP and Super Bowl MVP in the same season. I believe it's only happened 7 previous times. Who was the last non-quarterback to win regular season MVP and Super Bowl MVP in the same season?
Okay, I think I have a guess.
Let's try and run this back for a minute here because we've talked a number of times about Super Bowl MVPs on this show and how they don't always have to be the best player on the field. They just have to have the one good game.
Yeah.
Deion Branch, say hello. So,
but now this is a little bit different. This has to be a guy who was the regular season MVP. So now we're talking about the elite of the elite that season.
So where does your guess come from, Jerg? What time period does it come from?
I want to say this guy won his MVP in the 80s, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. So I'm thinking late 90s.
Okay.
So I think we're in the same because I'm trying to think of like 2000s. Like we're talking, yeah. Because I mean, if you think about 2000s, I was dominated primarily by quarterbacks.
Yeah.
You had a couple defensive players win it, but they weren't MVP candidates.
Right.
So
and the running backs, like we can eliminate honestly since 2000 because The running backs who've won MVP are LaDainian Tomlinson, didn't win the Super Bowl that year. Adrian Pearson didn't win the Super Bowl that year.
Yeah.
And Sean Alexander. Did they make the Super Bowl that year, or was that the year before or after?
Even if they made it in this time, they lost.
Right.
So he wouldn't have been that guy anyways, because that was the Roethlisberger Bettis Super Bowl.
Exactly. So, like we don't have to worry about like the year 2000, like to now, nothing to worry about. It's all before then.
Yeah, I would say so. Because I mean, 2010s, yeah. Because I mean, you're talking about Eli, you're talking about Foles, you're talking about Brady,
Von
Manning,
Miller, non-MVP. Well, he wasn't going to win a regular season MVP.
Breeze,
Malcolm Smith,
definitely not him.
Julian Edelman,
nope, for sure not him.
Cooper Kupp.
It's a real shame that James White didn't get MVP because I think he deserved it in that Super Bowl. But regardless,
he was great.
He was phenomenal. Nothing in there. All right. So I'm thinking late 90s. You're thinking 80s. You had your guess first. So who are you thinking of?
Jerry Rice. Because I'm pretty sure he's won Super Bowl MVP once. Like he won what 4? Like he had to have won it once. He's the best receiver in the game.
Well, yes. A bunch of those times were with Montana, so Montana probably could have won him as well. And then the last one with Steve Young, I know they put up 49 points, so either one could have won it. But was Jerry Rice an NFL MVP?
Yeah, he's won. He's won the NFL MVP.
He was.
Sure. That's why he's my guess, because I know for sure he's won the NFL MVP, and I know we like to say it's a very quarterback heavy thing,
right?
But I gotta believe Jerry Rice won one of the Super Bowl MVPs.
But my question then is he the most recent one? Because if you're thinking late 80s. I'm thinking maybe somebody a little later. He probably did, but I don't think he's the most recent, but it's worth a shout.
Well, this is where the guest comes in. Justin,
it's worth a shout.
All right. Well, unfortunately, Jerg, a wide receiver has never won the NFL AP MVP award.
Really? I thought he did win it.
Never won. He did win. He was named most valuable player by the PFWA. The Pro Football Writers of America.
Wow.
Yeah.
But yeah, he never won that award, unfortunately.
Did he win a Super Bowl MVP at least? He had to have.
He did win a Super Bowl MVP.
Okay.
Yes. I was thinking Sporting News or AP. Yeah. So my twosome that I'm thinking of right here, Terrell Davis and Marshall Faulk.
Ooh, yeah.
So my thing is that my question is, was the greatest show on turf, was that a Kurt Warner win Super Bowl MVP, or was it Marshall Faulk? Because I remember Kurt Warner had a really, really good game in that Super Bowl, but I think Marshall Faulk was the regular season MVP at some point in his career. It might have been that year. But Terrell Davis, I know I talked about him a couple weeks ago with the way that he ran in that migraine game, and 3 touchdowns. He won Super Bowl MVP in that game, and I think he was good enough to be an NFL MVP and an AP MVP. And the late 90s were definitely a league that was a little more driven by the running backs, because if you look at the league at that time, you did have stars at quarterback, but you had a lot more stars at running back than you currently do now. You had guys like Fred Taylor in Jacksonville. You had guys like Dorsey Levens in Green Bay, the aforementioned Faulk. Eddie George was making his run with Ohio State and with the Tennessee Titans. Tiki Barber was making his play. Emmitt Smith was in the twilight of his career at that point in time. So I'm going to venture to say Terrell Davis.
I think that's a great guess, because I believe he ran for 2,000 yards, and if he did, they almost always gave the 2,000-yard rushers
almost always
MVP. So I think that's a great guess.
Yeah,
that is an excellent guess. Terrell Davis is not the most recent one. Terrell Davis actually won an MVP, and then I believe the next year won the Super Bowl MVP. The year that he won the Super Bowl, Brett Favre was the MVP.
Oh, you know what? That makes sense. That makes sense, because they fought and they faced each other in the Super Bowls. That makes a lot of sense.
Brett Favre became the first ever 3-time MVP winner that year.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense.
But yes, he is one of 4 MVPs, I believe, to make the Super Bowl win. And I'm sorry, he's one of 4 Super Bowl MVPs. What was the thing? I don't know, but he wasn't named the Super Bowl MVP that year. The same year he won his MVP.
Fair enough.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Fair enough.
Okay.
All right.
Let's see if I can get that.
All right. So now let me think about this for a minute here.
I don't, Rick. I was going to say to your point because you brought up two names earlier. I want to say Kurt Warner did win Super Bowl MVP because that's a big reason why he made the Hall of Fame. Like,
didn't he throw for like 414 yards or something like that?
Pretty sure.
In the Super Bowl, yeah. So I think he definitely was Super Bowl MVP. I mean, Marshall Faulk is just a generational talent that, amazing.
Okay, so the stat was there's 11 players to win a Super Bowl in their MVP year. All but 4 did not win Super Bowl MVP.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Terrell Davis is one of the 4 to not win the Super Bowl MVP in the year that he won a Super Bowl and was the regular season MVP.
Got it. Okay.
Wow.
Damn. All right, so if I go back further in the 90s, Desmond Howard was Super Bowl MVP, but he was in no way, shape, or form going to be. Never. Further back from that, Aikman had to be a Super Bowl MVP, unless it's Emmitt Smith. But I don't know about Emmitt Smith winning. I don't know.
You think Aikman won a Super Bowl MVP? I thought he just won the Super Bowls.
No, he definitely won one. I think he won the one where they won 52-17.
Okay, yeah, that sounds about right.
You, generally speaking, when you have a blowout like that, the quarterback or a defensive player, Malcolm Smith, say hi, wins Super Bowl MVP.
Or what's the name, Dexter Jackson in that Tampa Bay Super Bowl.
Oh God, that was rough. That was a rough one. So
all those Hall of Famers, and Dexter Jackson wins the goddamn Super Bowl.
Right. I'm trying to rack my brain here to think about anyone from the 2010s that we're missing.
No, I don't think we are. Because like 2010s are around there. Non-quarterbacks that won Super Bowl MVP, Malcolm Smith and Von Miller.
Mm-hmm.
Neither won an MVP, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think Malcolm Smith ever made a Pro Bowl. So
Super Bowl MVPs include Eli, Flacco. God help me, I just mentioned him.
Multiple Brady's.
Multiple
Mahomes.
Yeah. Cup.
Cooper Cup.
So in the 2000s, I'm getting all those guys out of the way too.
Yeah. The question is definitely how far back do we have to go?
I'm going to go farther back. I just thought of a name.
I did too. I want to know if it's the same name.
Marcus Allen?
Yes.
Yeah. Weird that you guys thought of the same name.
That is weird.
Yeah.
Very rarely happens when we go far back.
Right.
That's true. Because it gets so many possibilities. But unfortunately, of the 11 players that have won a Super Bowl MVP, a Super Bowl and an MVP in the same season,
didn't get Super Bowl MVP.
He's not one of them.
We're gonna get that trivia before we get.
Well, no, he might have won Super Bowl MVP in one of those years, but he never won the Super Bowl
same season.
He won the MVP.
Okay.
Damn.
Okay. Jeez, then I don't know. I mean, this is tricky because those are two really, really good names. Really, really good names here. I mean, I'm trying to think of like who else might have, because Eric Dickerson, I don't think ever won a Super Bowl. But he was the year he rushed for 2,100. He definitely was Super Bowl NFL MVP that year
for sure.
What other people are there that I could think of? Maybe it is Emmitt Smith, man.
You think so? It might be.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe.
What season did he win MVP? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but the Cowboys went to back-to-back Super Bowls.
True. They won 3 out of 4.
Yeah. And, 2 of those years were against the Bills. So clearly they had the number. And I know that he was an MVP once.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm willing for us to stake our last guess there. So
let's do it.
Last guess, Emmitt Smith, Dallas Cowboys.
Guys, Emmitt Smith in 1993 is the most recent running back, non-quarterback, to win an MVP and a Super Bowl MVP in the same season.
He always gets me whenever he starts those sentences.
Oh
Like,
my god! I thought surely I was like maybe because I knew it. Wow, because I was gonna go further back. I was gonna pull out Lynn Swan or Fred Biletnikoff or one of those guys. I was gonna really go back, but
So, according to my source, there's actually only 2 other non-quarterbacks to do it. It was Lawrence Taylor in
fair shot.
1986,
You always forget that LT won an NFL MVP.
and
always
Jared, the first to ever do it, Mark Maselli in 1982, won a Super Bowl MVP and a regular MVP in the same season.
That was the player strike season.
Wait.
That was the player strike season.
Wait. When did he win a Super Bowl MVP?
In 1982.
Jesus Christ. Really?
Yeah, that's what it says.
That was like I knew that wasn't the answer because it had to have happened. So that's why I never bothered mentioning it. Come on, now, Justin.
That must have been a terrible Super Bowl.
No. I think that was the strike shortened season. That's why he won regular season MVP.
He won regular season, but no.
Oh, he didn't win the Super Bowl MVP. You're right.
I thought John Riggins won Super Bowl MVP that year.
You're right. It's Lawrence Taylor and Emmitt Smith. He didn't win the Super Bowl MVP. He was one of 11 players to make the Super Bowl in the same season that he won MVP and win it. He did. He was not Super Bowl MVP.
Got it. I was gonna say that would have been a real. Jerk would have had a shrine built to that guy because he loves kickers and punters so much that a kicker wins NFL MVP and Super Bowl MVP in the same season. Come on! Oh man,
yeah, that would have been perfect. That would have been perfect, and we would have finished this trivia a long time ago. But we finished the trivia now, so we have that with us. So what?
Yeah. Bye, Justin.
Well, I was about to go to Would You Rather, so thanks, Justin, for leaving at the wrong time.
I'm sure the Wi-Fi in his new studio, cut out on him.
Yeah,
that's how it goes in hotel rooms. Sometimes you have a really good one, but then the more stuff you add into the hotel room, the worse the Wi-Fi gets. You have a lot of blocking, like that painting behind him blocked out his Wi-Fi for about 2 seconds.
Yeah, no, I accidentally closed a tab, closing out my internet tab that I had that I didn't.
Justin, I was trying to save you the embarrassment of not giving away the game here. Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, Justin.
Yeah. Theater of the mind, Justin. Theater of the mind. Come on now. So, I was ready to make a joke with Would You Rather coming up. It's like, sorry, Justin, would you rather your Wi-Fi, Rick's Wi-Fi, or my Wi-Fi? That would have been the next one.
No, don't blame the Wi-Fi. It's treated me well. I don't want to bad
I'm doing good so far. I'm just going to say I'm doing good so far.
Ever since that mock draft we had, my Wi-Fi has been pretty good.
So. Well, once it realized that you can go for 3 hours at a time. I said, you know what? Let's try and raise the bandwidth a little bit because
I'm pretty sure service happened in my area a week after.
The one time Xfinity was good to you.
Yeah. All right. So let's get on to some Would You Rather, Justin. The trivia. Well, I'm assuming that's the end of the trivia, correct? Yeah. All right. Cool. So let's move on. I didn't jump the gun, thankfully. So let's go on to some Would You Rather. This is always the fun. This is one of the two that typically gets me and Rick debating a little bit here. So let's have at it.
Yes. All right, Rick. I'm coming for you today. All right.
Oh boy. Boy.
I had it lined up last week, and you weren't there.
I was in Newport, dude. Give me a break.
Well, I'm giving you. I saved the question for you. What do you mean? How much more of a break can I give you?
I don't know. More. What do you want? What do you got?
All right. Who would you rather have? Would you rather sign Derek Carr or would you rather trade for Aaron Rodgers?
Oh, please. Come on. Is there a third option lurking around somewhere where I can pick up some
topical conversation? Because these are the two big names that are coming out this year. Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers both coming off a fourth season. Aaron Rodgers, while there is no word that he will officially be traded as of yet, and we've heard these several times before, it just every year it seems more and more likely that he's out of there. And
I'm sorry, I just opened the darkness retreat and Aaron Rodgers is out, but he's not telling me anything. So I'll give you my answer. I'd sign Derek Carr. I would sign Derek. Derek Carr is younger. Derek Carr, I think, can work with a lot of younger teammates. And yes, I understand the concept, the question of can Derek Carr get you to a Super Bowl? I get that's a question, but I believe that he can under the right system. Keep in mind, this was the Raiders team that a couple years ago was looking at a number 1 seed or a number 2 seed at 13 wins, and were it not for a traumatic, catastrophic injury, they then had to start Matt McGloin in the playoffs. So I think it might have been longer than that. But so Derek Carr, I think, does have the capability. I just think that he's got saddled with a lot of rough times in Oakland/Vegas that he needs a fresh start. And I think the Jets are a piece away. That piece, I think, can be Derek Carr. And I think the thing is too that signing Derek Carr is not an offensive move. It's not. I don't want to say it's not an offensive move because it is. Note the difference in the tone in which I'm saying that. It's not an offensive move, but it's not an offensive move either. Because
So wait, take the Jets out of it. I
Yes.
understand where it would come from. Just
Yeah.
as a regular team,
Yeah.
don't worry about it. Not as a Jets fan,
yeah,
because you're not a Jets fan anymore, if you remember. But
exactly. But I'm trying to help you out.
regular team,
I still sign Derek Carr.
Early, you'd still sign Derek Carr.
I'd still sign Derek Carr. Look, yes, Aaron Rodgers is an MVP. He's talent. He's a bona fide Hall of Famer. But if you're signing a quarterback now, you have to go in knowing that you need a guy who's going to be there for more than 2 years, or more than a year and a half, or more than 11 games, depending on how Aaron Rodgers feels. You got to have a guy that you're going to try and build your franchise around. If it's the Jets, absolutely. If it's the Saints, I think, yeah, because if you give me Derek Carr to Michael Thomas, absolutely, I'll take that in a heartbeat. If you bring in Aaron Rodgers, that's a 2-year window or 1-year window where you're basically doing what the Rams have done. You're selling your soul for a Super Bowl, and you see how far the Rams have fallen. I think with Derek Carr, you can build a solid franchise and give him a second chance. So I personally think that Derek Carr is the better option. Will he be more expensive? Maybe. But if you have a good enough team to build around him, or you have a good enough team that has him, you could probably make a case for being consistent and for being a solid playoff team and eventually, possibly, probably getting to a Super Bowl, because if you can build a team around him, you can take it. Okay, if it was 2009 and it was Derek Carr now versus what Mark Sanchez was then, Derek Carr with that team that was around him, like the Faneca and all of those guys, the Jets probably would have beaten the Steelers or the Colts and gotten to a Super Bowl. So I'm just saying, I think Derek Carr is a much better option, because I think youth prevails over the known of Aaron Rodgers' legacy, but the unknown of Aaron Rodgers' temperamental behavior. What's he going to find next offseason? Is he going to find a crystal gold looking for the fountain of youth or something? Like, you don't know with this guy. So,
I mean, if a guy wants to try to find the lost gold city of El Dorado, let him go, Rick. Whatever he does in the offseason.
I am letting him go. Go there and don't come to my team.
I'm trading for Aaron Rodgers, because part of it is, and I think this is something that this ironically came up earlier this week in some conversation with some coworkers. But at the end of the day, to me, honestly, I think aside from a very select group of teams in the NFL, when we talk about having a window of time to be a legitimate contender, not every team is going to have a 4, 5, 6, 7-year window. Like Mahomes and the Chiefs are a special case. I think what potentially Cincy is trying to build with Joe Burrow and the Bills with Josh Allen are both very specific cases. And we know the Patriots are a dynasty, so like dynasties are rare air. I think for a lot of other teams in that next tier, you get a window of 2 to 3 years to go all in, and then you have to hit the reset button after. And if I'm thinking that mindset, if my defense was, what were they? I know this isn't a Jet specific question, but let's just use them as like the archetype. A top 10 defense last year, a skill position group where your top wide receiver of the future and your top running back from last year both just finished the first years of their rookie deals. So you got 3 more years left on cost control for the two of them. You still have good draft capital. Yes, you need to sacrifice your first round picks, but this is where your continued ability to pick deeper in the draft, which again, let's use the Jets archetype. You guys have had a pretty good job at doing so. I'm going with the quarterback that gives me the highest possible chance to win between those two. Like, not at the end of the day, not everyone, it's a fantasy scenario to always think you're going to get 5, 6, 7-year run with things. Sometimes you only get 2 to 3. And I brought up baseball because baseball is that archetype for the small to mid-market teams. They only get 2 to 3 years of a window to go. Look at the Chicago Cubs. They had a 2-3-year window. They got their World Series in that window. They also made it to the NLCS and lost, and look what they had to eventually do. The Kansas City Royals had a 2-year window, back-to-back years, made the World Series and lost, won the World Series the next year. It's the same in all sports. You don't always get that long window. So if you're giving me the idea that I have a very specific window of time, why would I not go for the player that gives me the better chance to have a higher ceiling of success in that window? Look, I sympathize of what happened with Derek Carr. Me and Justin were having this argument last week. I sympathize with Derek Carr's situation and everything that happens to him and with the Raiders at the end of the day. Scumbag organization, never fully behind him. Several regimes that wanted to get rid of him. I have no sympathy for the Raiders. I hope they have to settle with Andy Dalton or someone like that in the offseason and not get a better quarterback. But at the end of the day, give me the quarterback that gives me the higher chance to win. And yes, I know last year was bad, but this guy is one season removed from winning his 4th career MVP award. And again, you're setting yourself up with the archetype. I know we didn't say Jets, but top 10 defense, great skill position. Offensive line needs a little bit of work, and that's fair. But Rodgers hasn't had a clean offensive line for the last 2-3 years. David Bakhtiari has missed more games than he's played ever since he signed that contract. So, legitimately speaking, like, what are the odds here? At the end of the day, give me Aaron Rodgers. He gives me the higher chance. Derek Carr is in the Kirk Cousins, Ryan Tannehill, Jimmy Garoppolo tier to me. You can line all 4 of them up on a wall. I see a lot of similarities. You can make an argument for any of those guys being number 1 out of the 4, except for Ryan Tannehill. You can make an argument for 3 of those 4 guys to be number 1 of the 4 of them.
You're putting Mr. Primetime Kirk Cousins ahead of Derek Carr?
I'm saying if you want to make that argument, like I'm sure Justin would, then yes.
Sir.
But at the end of the day, but as long as Ryan Tannehill isn't number 1, I'm fine with it. But at the end of the day, like, those guys are within that same tier to me. They're not elite.
Well, look, so to the point that you made, if we're using the Jets as an archetype, right? The offensive line needs the most help of any group that's there, arguably speaking. If you're the Jets, why wouldn't you sign the guy? Because if you're trading for Aaron Rodgers, you're giving up that first-round pick. You're giving up a chance of getting an offensive lineman who can shore up, all of that, instead of trying to go for a free agent offensive lineman who might not be the greatest.
This is why I took the Jets out of it, because I want to know, realistically, I want you to include the idea where you're going to have to give up assets. Don't worry about what the team is.
You're going
to give up assets to what I assume is going to be a better quarterback, because let's face it, when he's healthy, even today, he's a better quarterback today than Derek Carr is. It's just a fact. Derek Carr had a rough season. You could make excuses for him. I understand he only had 1 good receiver, and they ran the ball 100 times a game. But he also still had the league's leading rusher, and he had one of the best receivers in the game. There's pros and cons to each guy. This is why I wanted to take the Jets out of it. Would you rather give up the assets for a guy that makes you a surefire contender just because of what he can be? Yeah, I know you're taking the Russ risk, Jerg, but realistically, I think it's less of a risk with Aaron Rodgers, especially because he had a major thumb issue last year, which I think will be good with no prior knowledge of medical experiences whatsoever. I think he'll have a better grip on the ball next year, which will help his accuracy. Or are you giving up nothing but cash to sign a guy who is much more of a wild card, has the physical tools to be that quarterback, but you don't know if he's going to win you a playoff game? He's never won a playoff game. He doesn't win games in the cold weather. He hasn't been that clutch guy since his MVP season, MVP caliber season, rather, where he got hurt. So
that was a long time ago as well. Like, we're making it sound like that was only 2-3 years ago.
You don't think that he can get back to that, especially now? I mean, it's become more and more of a passing league.
He's had 7 years. He's like, if you can't regain your form after 6-7 years, then I think we could just say that was an aberration.
How many offensive coordinators has he had? How many different receivers has he had? He's never had a top 10 defense where he's getting the ball in good field position. His offensive line has been different. I mean, his offensive line, I think he had 4 different offensive linemen in the Gruden years. Gruden was there how many years?
I just want to point this out too. That
5 offensive linemen.
That the fact is that in Derek Carr's 2016 season, when the Raiders were 12-3 before he got hurt, he was throwing for almost 4,000 yards and was quadrupling the touchdowns and interceptions. The next year he struggled because the Jets' new quarterback coach, Todd Downing, was his offensive coordinator. So this could be a reclamation story if you're Todd Downing, essentially, to work with the guy who it was your very first go as an OC. I know we're lumping the Jets in, but I'm saying there's also that little backstory there. I'm a guy that believes very much in keeping what you have in terms of your assets. Does Derek Carr deserve a lot of money? I think he does. I'm not, because if you're trading for Aaron Rodgers, you're giving the Packers multiple picks, and you're basically doing an RG3 for a 39-year-old guy.
this is not necessarily the case now, because if Aaron Rodgers does turn around and say, I want to be traded, then as much as the Packers would say you're a 4-time MVP, we need 3 first-round picks. He's 38 and controls his own destiny. He could turn around and say, I'm retiring if you don't trade me.
And
Now
honestly,
I have no leverage.
at the
And
end
walk
of the
away
day,
from
to
$60
that,
million?
like, we cannot continue
He's
to
guaranteed
assume
at some point.
they're not going to get what the Browns, what the Texans got for Deshaun Watson from Cleveland. They're not going to get.
They
first
used
round
to
picks.
turn
It's not
around
gonna happen.
the Devontae Adams situation where Devontae Adams definitely demanded at least 2 first-round picks, but he got traded for a first and a second.
Yeah, like
Why? Because he had all the leverage.
But
also,
you're
at
still
the end of the day,
handcuffing yourself, though, is the thing. I mean, look at San Francisco. Look at San
Not like
Francisco.
the Packers are not going to be handcuffed.
Right. Look at the 49ers this year. I know it's a different scenario, but look at the 49ers this year, coming off of an NFC championship game run where they used their 3rd-string quarterback, who was a 7th-round Mr. Irrelevant pick. You know they have the 99th pick. That's their first pick this year.
Yeah.
So what did they do? They gave up all those picks for Trey Lance. And how's that worked out for you?
this is where I'm going to say they gave it up for an unknown. I've said this before in the pod, and I'll say it again. I will always trust the devil I know than the devil I don't. And I don't know what truly the best of Derek Carr is. I've seen Aaron Rodgers at his best, and I'm going to bet my money that if I can get him at his best, he gives me the better chance to get to the superb owl, the 58th superb owl of all time, and maybe the 59th in a 2-year window, than Derek Carr will. And that's not even close between the two of them.
I don't know. I think there's a lot more to Derek Carr than we're giving credit for.
You think Derek Carr can win a Super Bowl?
Honestly. I think so. I think he can with the right system and the right pieces in place. I think he can. Absolutely.
If it isn't one of the top defensive of all time, there, no.
You think Derek Carr could be a piece on a team that wins a Super Bowl? Do you think Derek Carr can lead a team to a Super Bowl? If you needed it,
I think both. I think both. I think he can be a piece on a team, and I think he can lead that team to the Super Bowl.
I need a definitive leader. I can't have a maybe he could. Like if you're talking about the defense on the other side of Derek Carr,
you need a definitive leader. I'm not sure Aaron Rodgers is your guy.
I mean,
he's
that's
not
the franchise player. But I'm talking about the guy.
I know what you're saying.
Won Super Bowl MVP.
I won't argue. Aaron Rodgers, if I wanted to win a Super Bowl this year, and I had to pick a quarterback out of the candidates that we've said, Aaron Rodgers is the answer. We're not debating that. The debate is you have to give up something for him. Plus, you're going up to pay him realistically the same amount as Derek Carr, as opposed to Derek Carr, who you can get for that amount and not give up anything. That's the question.
Hey, higher quality things require more to give up for. Like if you want the better assets, if you want the better product, you got to pay a little bit more for it. That's how life works.
Go ask Shailene Woodley if he's a higher quality thing.
I don't care about B-list actors or actresses.
Wow.
Jerk.
Wow.
Everyone down.
Oh my God. The Trent Baalke of the podcast. Jesus.
Yeah. He's just going after everyone. Nobody's safe.
That was for the Trent Baalke comment.
Love it.
That was for the Trent Baalke comment. How dare you?
Jesus.
How dare you say his name?
Commander Jurg taking over.
How dare you say who shall not be named?
Rough.
Iron Fist with a velvet glove, Justin. Now,
speaking of which, where's my damn cake?
You're never getting it after that Trent Baalke comment.
Okay, that's fair.
So you screwed yourself over. I have it with me today. I'm going to eat it after the show.
Listen. Better you than me.
Yeah.
Better you
All
than me.
right. Do we have another Would You Rather, Justin?
No, that's good.
All right, we're going. do we have fact or fiction, just to confirm?
If you want. I mean, we've taken up a lot of time already.
I don't care. I love it. Let's get some. No, wrong one. Fact or fiction. All
right. Fact or fiction. You know what? This was more of a would you rather. Let me see if I could phrase it correctly. Lamar Jackson will stay in the AFC. So this was going to be if Lamar ends up leaving, where would he go kind of question, which is more of a would you rather. But let's keep it fact or fiction. Lamar Jackson is an AFC quarterback next year.
You know what? I like this better as a fact or fiction question than I do a would you rather. I'll be honest with you, because there's a lot of different possibilities in this regard.
Absolutely.
Well, I'm going fiction. I'm going to go fiction, and I'm going to throw out a random, ridiculous, hypothetical scenario that might be a bit of a shock. And if I get this right, good for me.
The show was built on hypothetical scenarios, so do it.
Lamar Jackson's going to be a Seattle Seahawk next year.
Ooh.
What?
So here's my thing.
Is that the mind-blowing fact of the week?
No, it's not. I feel the biggest wild card in this whole thing is that Lamar Jackson's his own agent, right? So he has no one that's telling him, hey, sign here because this is an X $1 million deal and I'll get a 20% cut. He's his own guy. He's doing his own thing. Baltimore has not shown any willingness to advance themselves, which I think you have to look at and say, okay, I think that's an agreeable thing, that they've not shown any willingness to advance themselves further. The AFC in of itself is a minefield when you have guys like Josh Allen, Joe Burrow, Patrick Mahomes, possibly, yes, Aaron Rodgers if he goes to a team in the AFC, Trevor Lawrence, who's had a resurgent year, I think, this year, and there's other pieces that are there, even Tua. The NFC, meanwhile, is a little more wide open. The NFC West is the most, I think, wide open of the four divisions. You can say the South, sure, but the South is a cluster. The West, you have Kyler Murray, who's with a brand new head coach, who we'll see how that tandem works out. You have right. You have a Rams team that has fallen by the wayside completely after their one Super Bowl win. You have a 49ers team that is trying to figure out who's their quarterback. If it's Brock Purdy, we'll see if he gets a full season. If it's Garoppolo, then you're keeping him for a lot of money, but I doubt it. They're probably the best team in the NFC West. But the Seahawks showed you this year, with Geno Smith under tow, that they can surprise a lot of people. And I think if Geno Smith does make a move, he's going to go for money. He's going to go somewhere else. Maybe he'll go to a team in the South. Maybe he'll try and lead the Buccaneers to a division title again. Maybe he'll do that. That leaves the door open for a Pete Carroll and Lamar Jackson with Kenneth Walker and DK Metcalf. Can you imagine the track meet that will be run in the Pacific Northwest if that's the quarterback, running back, wide receiver tandem that's there? That's a more truculent trio than the ones that are on this podcast, ladies and gentlemen. I think Lamar Jackson doesn't stay in the AFC. I think he goes to the NFC, and I wouldn't be surprised if the Seahawks are a big player in the sweepstakes for him. I think it would be an interesting fit, and it could possibly be a resurgence for them. Once from the dead, the Seahawks have come back to life, and if they get Lamar Jackson over Geno Smith, like as much as Geno Smith is a Ring of Honor caliber quarterback, and I know one of us will agree on that end, Lamar Jackson I think is an upgrade from Geno Smith, and so I feel like that might be his best course of action. So I don't think he stays in the AFC. I say fiction.
I will also actually go fiction because I am assuming that the Ravens are going to put the tag on him the second they get the chance. He doesn't need to agree to it, but they could still put the tag on him to keep him under tow to try to work things out with him. And at the end of the day, they could trade him. And why would they want to trade a guy that they tagged and keep him in conference? And I know maybe that's a little bit old school of a mindset, but I don't think the Ravens, because here's the thing, they re-signed Roquan Smith. There are guys in that defense that are locked in like relatively long term, or at least medium term. If you're Baltimore and you've royally screwed the situation with Lamar, give yourself. Here's the thing: I don't see Baltimore as an organization that thinks to themselves, "Okay, if we get rid of Lamar, we're going to tank." I see them more trying to have the kind of season that, ironically enough, that the Seahawks just had with Geno Smith after they got rid of Russell Wilson. So if you're going to trade him, why would you send him to an AFC team that would be competing with you for the wild card? Spoiler alert, the Bengals are my AFC North pick already. And at the end of the day, like, I don't see any reason that they would want to keep him in conference. Because I was going through the list of teams in my head while Rick was starting off. So I eliminated the AFC South because either the timeline just doesn't match for those teams. They're not good enough, or they're the Tennessee Titans. And the Jaguars have their guy. AFC North is out of the picture.
Completely.
AFC West, half the teams have their quarterbacks of the future, like definitively young guys in Mahomes and Herbert. The other one has Russell Wilson, and the other one is the Raiders. So, no. So that left me in the AFC East. Let's take out the Patriots, because I don't see Bill Belichick doing that. And let's take out the Bills, obviously, Josh Allen. All that's left is the Jets and the Dolphins. The Jets seem dead set on either getting Derek Carr or Aaron Rodgers. Like, I haven't heard any Lamar Jackson to Jets rumors this entire offseason when it was becoming a fantasy, like middle to the end of the season that just finished. And the Dolphins, while I could see it happening, again, this is where you need to consider the Ravens. if they tag Lamar to try to keep him and they try to work it out, or they do ultimately acquiesce and say, okay, we will trade you somewhere. If they still have the mindset of, because think about this, if they handle this quicker than what we're expecting, let's say before the start of free agency, they deal Lamar Jackson. You still have time to get your next quarterback. Maybe you enter the sweepstakes for one of these tier 2 quarterbacks with that defense, with some improvements to make on the offensive end of things and changing up the scheme. In that scenario, why would I trade him to a team that definitively, in the Dolphins, either A, Lamar makes them the AFC East winners and then the Bills become a wildcard team, or B, they at least become the main AFC wildcard team we talk about next season, and that's a competitor for me. Why would I want to do that? So I would send Lamar Jackson to the NFC. Now, I didn't get to go through the Rolodex of the NFC teams in my brain yet. I'm not going to do that to waste any more time here for us. But the Seahawks make sense. And Geno Smith, he deserves money. Like, he just had a career year. He's going to make the Ring of Honor one day for Seattle just for this season alone. But he deserves to get that one big payday he's going to get. When we all thought he was going to be out of the league, probably after another year or two, this is his one shining moment to get the payday that every single athlete dreams of when they get in their sport. So he's going to most likely be gone. Who knows? Maybe the Ravens go after Geno Smith after they trade Lamar Jackson there. Like, you never know. Or they get Geno Smith back in the trade, like in some sort of like little like negotiating rights deal. But at the end of the day, I'm with Rick. I don't think Lamar stays in the AFC because I'm going through they're going to tag him scenario. And if they are going to trade him after tagging him, makes no sense to keep him in the AFC because I don't think that organization is tanking after trading Lamar Jackson. I think they still want to be competitive.
Yeah, I don't see him going to an AFC team at all, unless it's Baltimore. It's Baltimore or bust for him. But the NFC, there's a lot of possibilities, a lot of interesting scenarios that are there too. I mean, Seattle for me is the number one. But I mean, I mentioned the South. If you put him in Tampa or New Orleans, that immediately makes them the favorite to win that division. So, that's a possibility. That's a thought too. And I wouldn't put him in the North because I don't think Lamar Jackson's the cold weather type of guy. And I don't know how he would do in Green Bay. I really don't see it. I don't. So
I mean, playing in Baltimore, Cleveland, Cincinnati, and Pittsburgh his entire career so far for 6 games of the season.
But Green Bay's a different animal.
Fair.
Yeah,
fair.
That's what I'm saying. Green Bay's a bit of a different animal than those 4. But I think he's NFC. He's either Baltimore or he's NFC. There's no middle ground.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. All right, that was great. Yeah, I'm with Rick, Justin. I think that was a great way that you molded it into a fact or fiction. So good stuff out of you, bud. Outstanding games as always. Before we get to the main course of the show, which is the rundown I mentioned earlier, we have time for a mind-blowing fact. Rick, give it to us.
Well, you mentioned the Denver Broncos, who their star quarterback was in the, and I say star loosely, their star quarterback was in the news this week for comments about, possibly wanting to get Pete Carroll fired from Seattle, and he's denying that. But we all know that he said it. And, it's not about him. It's about the Broncos. Here's your mind-blowing fact for this week, gentlemen. Denver has been in 8 Super Bowls, which I think is just surprising in of itself. But it's only taken 1 Super Bowl for one quarterback to do something that you might be surprised to hear. And that would be Doug Williams. Now, of course, the conversation going into this Super Bowl was that it was Jalen Hurts and Patrick Mahomes, 2 African-American quarterbacks, and Doug Williams was the first one to play in and win a Super Bowl. In that Super Bowl, Doug Williams, which was a 42-10 shellacking by the Washington then Redskins over the Denver Broncos, Doug Williams threw for 4 touchdowns in that one Super Bowl. The Denver Broncos in 8 Super Bowls have had 4 touchdown passes. That's correct. Now, I went through the list, which is also part of the reason why there's actually writing on here, as you can clearly see, of the Super Bowls that Denver was in. In their very first one, Super Bowl 12, they only scored 10 points on a field goal and a rushing touchdown. In that game, Craig Morton, who was the quarterback, threw for 4 interceptions, by the way. Great game. Their second one, they had their first touchdown catch, which was a Vance Johnson catch from John Elway. But interestingly enough, Denver's backup quarterback got some time. That was in the 38-20 Giants win over the Broncos. Denver's backup quarterback got some time on the field, won 4 for 4 in that game. His name was Gary Kubiak. Huh. Interesting enough. The next one was the Redskins one where Ricky Nattiel had a 56-yard catch from John Elway, but there was only 10 points in that game. And then they had a run of rushing touchdowns, which is interesting for the Broncos. In Super Bowl 24, which they lost 55-10 to San Francisco, there was of all people, John Elway rushing touchdown and a field goal. So no passing touchdowns there. The next one they were in was Super Bowl 32, which I talked about on the show ad nauseum. They scored 31 points, a field goal, and 4 rushing touchdowns, 3 by Terrell Davis. Then the next year they had 34 points, which was the Tim Dwight kick return game. 1 passing touchdown there for Rod Smith, an 80-yard catch from Elway, so that's 3. Then in the game in which they were absolutely destroyed by the Seattle Seahawks, 43-8, and Bruno Mars performed at halftime, they did have a touchdown pass from Peyton Manning, but they also had a 2-point conversion. So that was nice. And then in Super Bowl 50, they scored 21 points on a field goal, a rushing touchdown, and a fumble recovery for a touchdown. Interestingly enough, this game is known for 2 things, well, 3 things. 1, the terrible halftime show, unless you love Beyonce, which, good for you. Whatever. Ducks, because Peyton Manning was clearly throwing ducks. And the interesting trivia question for this one, the person that caught the very last pass Peyton Manning ever threw in his NFL career in the Super Bowl was a 2-point conversion to undrafted Michigan State wide receiver Benny Fowler.
Wow.
So Doug Williams of the Redskins, 4 touchdowns in 1 game. The Denver Broncos, that horrible franchise, 4 touchdowns in 8 Super Bowls. There you go.
I'm more mind blown by the fact that Benny Fowler was the last person to ever catch a pass from Peyton Manning. Like,
that made it 21-10.
We just got a 2 for the price of 1.
That made it 21-10, and there were 56 seconds in the game. So there was no time for Denver to throw any more passes. It was Seattle or Carolina rather on offense, and if God forbid that they had a pick, which I don't know how the game ended because who watched the ending, then it would have been a kneel down. That would have been it. So
wow,
there you go.
Wow. Look, wow, we just got 2 for the price of 1. The Podfather just blessed you all.
Well, I wasn't here last week, so you had. I know you didn't know you loved the Frankie Muniz one, but I had to give you 2 of the NFL ones. So there's a lot less NFL mind-blowing facts than there are random other mind-blowing facts. So I'm trying to give you a little bit more as I go along.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, it kind of makes sense. The NFL encompasses one specific thing, and everything else is literally everything else.
True. you couldn't be more accurate about that statement, Jerk.
I'm waiting for Rick's mind-blowing facts to start dating us back to like the year 1673.
I have one around the NFL draft time that'll get you there. Trust me.
Oh, what? Oh, God.
Nice little teaser.
What'd you say, Justin?
How many of these have you actually planned out?
Oh, you should see the note on my phone. There's about 55 or 60 of these things.
God.
Listen, if we're going to keep the show going past, all time, we got to keep going. So.
Yeah, that's the thing, Justin. We can never really prepare. I mean, Rick is already preparing. He's already writing down the material for next year's Twist the Night Before Rantsmas. So.
Oh, we've already started. Although I'm trying to figure out which Christmas story I'm going to write it with instead. But we'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's something to figure out. 9.5 for some months down the line. I think we got time, Rick.
Or on a day where we're not recording a show, that would also be good too.
That too. So moving on from that, the games were fantastic as always. Rick always delivering with his mind-blowing fact. So let's go in some of the rundown here, guys. Like I mentioned at the top, it's the interesting point of the year where the season ended and the offseason is about to begin. And all we have are rumors at this point, so we can't really talk about any transactions now. But we still have some things that we're going to discuss. Ironically, we've done so much quarterback conversation, so we're just going to continue with that trend here when it comes to talking about the quarterbacks in general. But before that, I mentioned it earlier, I do have the important dates for this upcoming NFL offseason. So let's get to it. Ironically, the first of these dates is starting very soon. February 28th to March 6th, we have the NFL Scouting Combine at Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis, Indiana. March 7th, New York time, so EST. Deadline for clubs to designate franchise or transition players for the tag. March 13th to 15th, free agency legal tampering period begins at noon on March 13th. March 15th, the 2023 league year and free agency period begins 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. The 26th to the 29th is the annual league meetings in Arizona. April 21st is the deadline for restricted free agents to sign offer sheets. This is a big one for us personally. April 27th to the 29th. The NFL draft in Kansas City, Missouri.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, what fun that is going to be for us. So we have the important dates there. And really, to continue the conversation that we've already begun with here, let's keep it going. Let's keep it rolling with quarterbacks. We talked about Lamar Jackson thanks to the fact of fiction. We've mentioned Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers now. Guys, this year's quarterback class between free agency and the draft is very, like, I don't know if stacked is the right word. I feel like stacked is an overused term, but it's pretty deep in terms of what you can go after. Obviously, you have the two high-tier quarterbacks who have won the MVP in the past, and Lamar Jackson and Aaron Rodgers, who are both in very interesting, precarious situations in terms of what their futures could be. You have the next rung of quarterbacks down that list, with Jimmy Garoppolo being a free agent now, Derek Carr, who we've talked about ad nauseum being a free agent, Geno Smith, the Ring of Honor legend himself, being a free agent. You also have Daniel Jones, who's going to be a free agent. Baker Mayfield, I believe, is a free agent. I would assume the Rams would try to keep him, but you never know what LA could do. Again, because the future of Matthew Stafford, I haven't seen any updates. In part, I haven't seeked out any updates. If his career is still in doubt because of the injuries that he suffered at the end of last season, who knows? But then you go to the draft here. You have Bryce Young, C.J. Stroud, Will Levis, and Anthony Richardson. 4 guys that are projected by a lot of different mock drafts to all go in the first round. So between this list of quarterbacks you could either sign or potentially trade for and the draft, this is like a double-digit number of quarterbacks that I've just rolled out there in terms of guys who could change teams, be on new teams, be new signal callers. It's a lot to take in. So, Justin, I want to throw it to you. Your thought, like, it's interesting. So we've already talked about some of these guys. We talked about Derek Carr, right? And I mean, you and me spoke about him last week. If you maybe want to reiterate that point, but let's look at some of the quarterbacks that could be switching teams here. Give your thoughts on ideal situation for any of them. There's so many guys we could talk about and we could go in a direction with. Who do you think that this starts out with, Justin? Who do you think will be the first quarterback off the board in the free agency pool?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, Derek Carr did say he wanted to have a deal done before the start of free agency.
He did. Doesn't mean it's going to happen.
No, it's up to him. He's got the ability to make that happen. So I would assume it's going to be Derek Carr. It's interesting where his best fit would be, because there are 2 teams out there that have very good skill positions and really solid defenses. Now, obviously, one played a lot better last year, but you can make the argument that because of their run game and surgence of, I guess their strength of schedule, but the Jets are obviously a very good fit for him. And I believe the Saints would be too. I mean, if Michael Thomas can come back healthy, Chris Olave had an excellent season last year, albeit it was marred with some injuries. And they still have Alvin Kamara, who, I mean, hopefully is not in jail. I know he's gotten some legal troubles as of late, so I don't really know much about it. I'm not going to comment on it, but obviously the game is better with him in it. Whether or not he deserves to be there, we'll discuss another time. But yeah, like I said, that's also a great fit for a free agent quarterback like Derek Carr, who likes to throw the ball down the field. So if it's one of those 2 teams, which I think it will be, that would be probably his best landing spot.
Yeah. Rick, I know you talked more about the situation when you set this video last week. What are your thoughts about the Derek Carr situation? I mean, like Justin said, I'm sure he would want to get on a team here very soon, preferably before like the full start of free agency. Definitely in that tampering period that I just detailed, that's going to be from the 13th to the 15th, when in reality these guys have probably already been talking to people for at least the last week. But let's see. Like, do you think it'll ring true to what Derek Carr wants? And Justin technically is right that it is in his hands to make that decision, but he also could wait. So do you think Derek Carr will be the first guy off the board? And if you do, who do you think would then be the next domino to fall?
I just want to say for the record, Stephen Ross just called my cell phone, so I'm going to let it wait out because, I don't know why he called me, but, tampering reasons sound like Stephen Ross. It's like Beetlejuice, etc. The Derek Carr situation, I think, is it's interesting because I think a lot of players are like this, where they want to get things done as soon as possible so that there's not a bigger groundswell of question marks about, where they're going to go or, what teams that, you want to be the answer to the solution, not the solution, if you will. You want to be the one that kind of gives a team an easy time in free agency where they don't have to worry about a quarterback in that sense. So I think Derek Carr saying that is the right move. It's on him. He's got to know where he wants to go, and he's got to find the best market that works for him. So I think in that mindset, will he be the first one? He could be. I think it's a very good possibility. I'd like to think more so that the guys that are probably going to be the first ones that are going to be signing or re-signing are going to be the guys that are going to stay with the teams where they are. So because I looked up, there are 38 quarterbacks ranging from Derek Carr to Gardner Minshew that are free agents. And I think like if it's a cop out answer, maybe, but I think the first guy that's going to re-sign is Cooper Rush, because the Cowboys are not going to be stupid in letting him go because they have nobody behind Dak Prescott. And you saw how good Cooper Rush was this year. But if we're going for like top tier guys that make the most sense,
Taylor Heineke, right?
No, I was actually gonna give you a legit. I think Heineke's gone from Washington. I do. I was gonna say Daniel Jones. The Giants need to keep Daniel Jones, and they need to do it in a way that makes sense for them and to keep Saquon Barkley. They got to keep their top two in tow. And Daniel Jones has said he will take less money to stay with the Giants if it means they're keeping Saquon Barkley as well. Because it's all about that. Look, they caught lightning in a bottle. You don't just let that go away. And maybe you don't give Jones a long-term deal, but you give him a deal that's a couple years and the money that he's valued. So if it's like a 2-year, $35 million a year deal, so it's $270, you give him that short-term thing, see how it works, see if it wasn't just a fluke, but you keep Barkley on a long-term as well. And then you try and get other pieces that are there. I think it's the best mold and mindset for those guys to stay where they are. There are other guys that are out there that probably are going to move around, or it's going to be dictated by where everybody else is going. But here's the thing: if you look at the New York Giants, if you don't bring in Daniel Jones, who are you going to bring in that's going to have the same electricity and the same vibrance in this offense that you got with Brian Daboll and Mike Kafka in year one? You're going to tell me that Jacoby Brissett's your answer? You're going to tell me they're going to go after Garoppolo? I don't think that's going to work. I think Daniel Jones is the guy that has to go after Derek Carr or before Derek Carr, depending. And I think he's got to stay with the New York Giants.
Wow. Daniel Jones staying in the can I technically say Big Apple when their stadium is in New Jersey? I don't know, but
metro area.
Yeah. That's fair. The metropolitan area, the tri-state area,
right?
So that's interesting to say the least, and that'll definitely be one of the things to watch out for. And we're going to bring up the Giants boys again in the segment here. Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, there's something to say. You mentioned a name there, Rick, that I don't know where he's going to go, because I know he has the track record. I know he has the success in his career. But where does Jimmy Garoppolo go? Let me throw this to Justin first. Justin, Jimmy Garoppolo to me is the core, because you mentioned a couple teams that make sense with Derek Carr. I mean, we've spoken about the Jets, we've spoken about the Saints and all that. Right now with Rick, talking about Daniel Jones being the guy that he's probably going to stay with the Giants, if they keep him, depending on how much, what the contract is and all that. Jimmy Garoppolo is the guy that I'm struggling to get a sense with here, because we know he's not staying in San Fran. So where does he go? Where does Jimmy Garoppolo go to? We assume he wants to get paid again. He's got one last contract in him. I don't know how much it's going to be, but he's probably going to get at least a decent deal here. Get some money. Probably wants to try to win again, but it's got to be a system that he can work with, and it's also got to be a place where he would be the number one guy. Options, I feel, are a bit limited for him in that aspect of it. Or is there a team I'm not thinking of that you're about to tell us about here, Justin, that Jimmy Garoppolo will be the guy for?
Yeah, there's a few different teams. It's funny because going into midway through the season, all you heard was Jimmy Garoppolo is the quarterback that's going to get paid this offseason. Jimmy Garoppolo this, Jimmy Garoppolo that. And now we're here, and it's kind of like it's all about Derek Carr and Aaron Rodgers. And I mean, even Tannehill is getting more coverage than Jimmy Garoppolo is at this point. And it's weird considering he's the most recent quarterback to have actually played in the Super Bowl out of all of those players.
Yeah.
So it's interesting. There are a lot of places I could see him going. And two of them are surprisingly still in his division. Obviously, I don't think that the Rams are going to, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Cardinals made a move, especially if they're not sure when Kyler Murray's going to come back. So to have a 1-year placeholder, Jimmy Garoppolo can come in. He's a guy that's bet on himself before. If they can put him in a good enough situation, maybe he, makes himself some money on a 1-year deal before Kyler can come back. And this way Kyler has the time to rest and relax, and they don't have to worry about it. if you want to be a little bit more realistic about winning, maybe he goes to Seattle. I mean, you saw what they did with Geno Smith, a guy that we didn't expect anything from. And now all of a sudden you have a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo who is known to be a similar style quarterback in that he can throw the ball. He's not going to be a world beater, but he doesn't make mistakes. He beats you with his technical skill, not his arm talent or his ability to make plays. He's one of those guys that's going to sit there and sit in the pocket. And if you get wide open, he'll hit you. So if they can't re-sign Geno Smith, what a way to come back and say, hey, listen, I took you to a Super Bowl and then you traded 3 first-round picks for a quarterback that is not playing. And then when I took you back to the playoffs, you still don't want me?
Yeah.
Now I'll play you twice a year.
That'd be something to say the least. What about the Cardinals? I'm not sure because I think Jimmy G wants a long-term deal, and I just don't know if it would make sense.
I don't blame
Jimmy
him, but I'm just saying I
guy.
think that that's a way that he could say, all right, they have some decent receivers there.
Yeah.
I know that they're thinking about trading D-Hop. He asked for a trade. Yeah, and they don't expect to keep Robbie Anderson and AJ Green retired. So maybe they don't have great receivers there. But it's a team that's within the division. It's still a warm weather and a dome, which I think is helpful for a guy like him. And he can kind of like control his own destiny, so to speak, where if he plays really well and Kyler's not ready to come back in October and he plays through November and they're in a playoff spot, maybe he's up for, a trade early November when Kyler's ready to come back. Or maybe he gets a long-term deal out of that because he played so well on a team that wasn't really – I don't think there's going to be a lot of expectations next year for the Arizona Cardinals. It's a low-pressure situation. They need a quarterback at least in the beginning. It's a situation. It's something that I think a lot of players, a lot of people are going to overlook in free agency this year.
Yeah, fair. I mean, I was expecting the Cardinals to go after a quarterback. I expected them to more go after like one of the mid. I'm fully expecting them. Rick mentioned Jacoby Brissett. I could see the Cardinals giving Jacoby Brissett a year, just like the Browns just did for him. Like I think they'll go after him personally. Because at the end of the day, I would not put a quarterback that like ruffles the foundation or the tier system. At the end of the day, that's Kyler's team when it comes back, whether we think it should be or not, whether you think he's there long term or not.
But you know what? I think that's one of the biggest issues that they've had with Kyler Murray is the sense of entitlement, so to speak. I mean, I don't necessarily know what it's like there. I don't really follow the Cardinals that closely. Like if there's a team in the NFL that doesn't really get the most attention in my mind is the Arizona Cardinals.
Yeah,
but
it is.
Maybe they bring someone in to challenge him a little bit, show him how to quarterback where it's supposed to work in the NFL. All you hear about is Kyler Murray doesn't have any work ethic. Kyler Murray's entitled. Kyler Murray's a baby. Maybe bring in a professional, a true pro. He's been there. He's worked with Hall of Famers. He's been to the Super Bowl. He wins games. He knows what it's like to earn that big money and that big contract.
So from what I'm hearing, the Cardinals are bringing in Blaine Gabbert.
No, Nate Sudfeld.
No, I actually
play in the Super Bowl, or he just went.
Yes, I think he just won. But I actually had a name that I was thinking of too. It's like a to your point, like a short term, but not the Garoppolo money. What about Jarrett Stidham going to Arizona? Especially because Las Vegas is
he
hanging him. He is. Vegas is hanging him out to dry with the Aaron Rodgers talk.
Yeah,
So why don't he go somewhere? It's interesting, by the way, that both Geno and Drew Lock are UFAs.
Yeah,
for Seattle.
Well, I think again, the original plan, like the Seahawks did not expect to be this good. The Seahawks plan from day one with that trade last year was, all right, we're going to be a 2 to 3 win team. We're going to probably get the top pick or one of the top 2 picks in next year's draft. Both of these guys could just walk away after this year. We sing Kumbaya, shake hands, and leave. But that's not what happened. Now we're going to see. Speaking of Geno Smith there, Rick, you've already given us your opinion on old pal.
Well, I do also have a landing spot for Garoppolo that I'm thinking of.
Okay. Actually, yeah, continue with that. And then, regale us again on Geno Smith to Tampa.
You're not going to like what I have to say about Garoppolo there, though. So,
you're sending him to Tennessee, aren't you?
No. I'm sending him to Washington.
Oh, okay.
So here's the thing. There's a history.
Believe in Sam Howell?
Yes, but this is, remember, we've talked about audition games and show me contracts and all of that. This is a show-me situation for three guys in particular. Ron Rivera, Eric Bieniemy, and Jimmy Garoppolo. Everybody there has to prove that they are legitimate as they say that they are. Ron Rivera has to prove that he's not a 7-10 head coach. Eric Bieniemy has to prove that he can be an offensive guru without Andy Reid's help. And Jimmy Garoppolo has to prove that he can be the guy that can win you games and get your team back to relevancy. He's done that with San Francisco. Washington's got a good young core of wide receivers, a very good running game, a nice defense. Why not bring in a quarterback if you're going to go with Sam Howell and you don't think that he's fully ready yet? Why not bring in Garoppolo, like you were saying, with Arizona, but in a situation where Sam Howell's got a couple more years of like seasoning instead of Kyler Murray, who you're paying $213 million to? You know, I think there's an interesting marriage of sorts between Garoppolo, Bieniemy, and Rivera.
I also like that, Rick, because I think Jimmy is so sick of the last couple of years with Trey Lance. Like, even with a young quarterback behind him, I don't think he wants to go somewhere where he knows he's just a temporary guy. That's why I kind of rule out the Arizona thing. Because for all we say about what, you know, has been said about Kyler, at the end of the day, they have to stick with that. That's not a contract they could just move out of right away. This, like, they just signed him last year.
Yeah.
Like, this is not a deal that they're going to be able to get out of until maybe, 2025, potentially? Like, You're stuck with that. Whether you like it or not, you're stuck with that for at least 2 to 3 seasons. I don't think Jimmy wants to be somewhere where he knows he's only going to be there temporary. I think he wants to go somewhere where, even if there's a young quarterback like Sam Howell did not come in with the pedigree of a Trey Lance. Sam Howell did not come in with being a first-round pick. Like, yes, Jimmy can like help him out a little bit, but there is no expectation of what he had to do for Trey Lance there. It's Jimmy Garoppolo can be the guy. And I actually do like Washington as the selection there because, and again, they have some offseason work to do as well, a little bit on that roster. But there is the potential here, and I think the underrated part, and it's actually a good thing you brought it up, Rick, because I don't think it happened when we recorded last week, or maybe we just tabled it to this week. But Eric Bieniemy being the offensive coordinator now, being forced to make a lateral move because nobody in the NFL wants to, give him his due credit. When we gave Matt Nagy the same credit for doing the same thing, except not winning the Super Bowl, and we made him the head coach. But to each his own. I think you can kind of see the issue that I'm saying, but irregardless, Eric Bieniemy forced to make a lateral move here. He's only signed for 2 years in Washington. That's the key. He only signed a 2 year. This is a 2-year tryout for him to prove he can be the guy. And why not bring a guy like, I think you mentioned great. I think people that all have chips on their shoulder, I think combined, they could, this would be an amazing, like, just personal vendetta tour against them.
Well, I also think the interesting thing with Bieniemy is that they named him assistant head coach because if for some reason there's a new ownership group that doesn't want Ron Rivera in there, just move Bieniemy up to head coach and give him his due and see what happens.
Yeah,
it's a possibility. Now, to chips on your shoulder, back to your Geno Smith, why I think the Tampa could be a good fit. Reunites him with his old coach, Todd Bowles. Mm-hmm. It gives Geno an opportunity to show that this year in Seattle wasn't a fluke. Gives him a chance to go to a team with a head coach that was a guy that was around when he was coming into the league, and gives them both a chance for redemption in a sense. Look, the NFC South is still very much a wide open division. It's probably, when we do the divisional breakdowns later on this year, it's going to be the first one we do because it's probably going to be the worst one that we're thinking of.
Yeah. It also could be the one where all three of us have a different team and we could all say we're right or wrong.
We probably all will. But I think it's a good case where, Tampa. So Tampa's interesting because you mentioned 4 of the rookie quarterbacks that could go in the first round. But I'm also seeing a lot of talk about Tanner McKee out of Stanford going to Tampa at the 19th overall pick.
Really?
And here's my thinking. That's going to be if we can't get anybody in free agency,
they have to go there.
They have to go there because they don't have anybody else. Because I mentioned Blaine Gabbert, he's a free agent, and I don't think he's going to re-sign with Tampa again just to be their backup. So I think this is a case where you can ride the hot hand of Geno Smith, and you can get away with a Geno Smith if it leads you to a divisional championship. Because again, not a lot of teams in this division are making improvements. Atlanta's still a very young team. With a very unsettled quarterback situation of Desmond Ridder or Marcus Mariota. Carolina's got a brand new head coach. You don't know who their quarterback's going to be because Darnold's a free agent. So is P.J. Walker. Matt Corral was injured last year, so who knows where he's going to go. And then you have New Orleans. Who knows what they're going to do? So go with an established hand here in Geno Smith who can probably get you another 4,000 passing yards and lead you to a 9-8 season that'll probably get you the NFC South divisional title again and get you a home game again. What's the difference except for, a couple wins here or there or a couple losses here or there, I think Gino has, like you said, he's earned his payday. I think it's an interesting move, and it's an interesting little partnership that could be formed over there. I think Bruce Arians is all about, leading the GMs of this team and being a special assistant, saying, hey, let's give guys who deserve a second shot or deserve a third shot a shot. Which is why Todd Bowles was there. And even though he didn't have the greatest season this year, they still got to a playoff game. They still won a divisional title. It wasn't a good playoff game, but they still got there. And it's like you said, if you're removed from a situation where you've won a Super Bowl recently, it doesn't necessarily matter how good you perform the next couple of seasons because you're still on that high from winning. I mean, the Cubs broke a 108-year streak. They're still on that high 7 years later. I think the case there for Geno to Tampa, I think it fits. And I think, too, it would help Mike Evans a lot. And you would also see if Chris Godwin is still the guy that he was this year because he had a breakout season. And if he's still that guy with Geno there as well, maybe there's no drop-off.
We also forget the fact that their offensive line is still, they were just injured last season, that offensive line. It's not because people left. It's because guys got hurt. And that defense is still headed by Levante David and Devin White, who are both still supremely talented. At least Devin White, I think he's due a contract here pretty soon, maybe this offseason, if I'm not mistaken. So you're going to have to pay a cornerstone of the defense if you hope to keep it. And a decent defensive back crew, Carlton Davis, Sean Murphy Bunting. Nothing. They're not world beaters, but they're still pretty good. I get what you're saying. I definitely see it. Geno Smith is a guy I could see going in a couple situations. I know I threw out just very briefly there the idea that Baltimore, they get rid of Lamar Jackson for themselves. They could go in with the guy with bringing in a Geno Smith type guy. Because again, I personally think if Baltimore does have to part ways with Lamar Jackson, I think they're going to be in play for one of these quarterbacks because this is not an organization that takes. They're just not. And I could very much see a situation where if they can come to the Lamar decision early and they could do that, they would go after one of these free agents and who knows, maybe do they try to be a player for the next tier of quarterback in this draft? Maybe do they go after Richardson? Maybe do they go after try to trade up if they get a first-round pick early for Lamar Jackson in this deal? They're probably going to get multiple. Could they trade up and maybe get Levis if they like him or Stroud? You never know what the situation is going to be here at the end of the day. So Baltimore in and of itself. That's why I brought up Lamar here a few times because I think Lamar Jackson is an access point to what Baltimore will do and to what other teams could do depending on what happens. But obviously, we've kind of talked about Derek Carr is the main domino to fall here at the end of the day. And, or at least the projected first one. And from there, a lot of guys could go to love or other places. I think Jimmy Garoppolo, it could be very interesting just on him really fast. You mentioned Carolina, Rick. I could see a situation where Carolina may go after one of these free agent quarterbacks. And, I mean, Frank Reich is used to trying to work with old free agent quarterbacks. But these guys aren't necessarily, old men. They still have a little bit. Could Jimmy Garoppolo be that guy to instill a winning culture in Carolina with Frank Reich being there? I'm sure, Frank Reich, to me, Jimmy Garoppolo feels like a quarterback that could really work with Frank Reich. Frank Reich is not a head coach that I feel would butt heads with his quarterback. I don't think the problem was never he butted heads with his quarterbacks in Indians. The problem was never that his quarterbacks didn't like him. They weren't good enough. They just were never good enough. There was never a total ceiling there in Indy per se. And I think that would be a pretty good situation they could find themselves. A team that we have not brought up here, which, we're about to get into the conversation here, so let's switch things over. Guys, there are a lot of teams here that could make moves, and maybe some of it has to do with quarterbacks, teams that need to make a move. And this is the next, and there's a reason why I bring up this team here, not so much for in-depth convo, but just to get us started on the idea. Detroit Lions were a game away from the wild card. We've talked about what's the decision going to be. Are they going to keep Jared Goff, which Jared Goff is maybe a quarterback that could be in play depending on what the future of the Lions could be. And we've had that conversation several times on the show in the past. But whether it's the draft, whether they may, who knows? Maybe Lamar Jackson is going to be wearing Detroit Lion blue next year, boys. But I know not realistic, but just putting it out there. The Lions are a team to me that I think we all agree. The belief is that they are a quarterback away in regards to their franchise quarterback, the guy who's going to be there for 10, 11, 12 years. That guy is yet to be in Detroit yet. And that's going to be the next step for them. So I use the Lions more as a transition, unless you guys want to speak about them real quick, although I think we've talked about them so much. I think we just need to wait to see what Detroit will do in the offseason. Let's shift the conversation over to teams that I know I'd suggest they need to make a move. But what's a team that's a move or two away this offseason, lads, that is there to take the next step? Now, like I said, Lions, they were a game away from the wild card last year. If they had a better defense or that franchise quarterback, maybe more so the defense last season, they could have been in the playoffs over the Seahawks. the New York Giants upset the Minnesota Vikings, but we clearly saw they were outclassed by the Eagles. They probably would have been outclassed by the 49ers. What can the Giants do to try to try to close the gap a little bit between those teams? What can the Minnesota Vikings do to stop being frauds in the NFC? What can the Miami Dolphins do to, yeah, I agree. What can the Miami Dolphins do to close the gap with the Buffalo Bills? The AFC North, we believe, is Cincinnati for the taking, excuse me, because we don't know about Lamar. So many different equations, so many different scenarios we could run through. So this is a little bit, I want to say maybe erratic segment, because there's different teams that we could all bring up here. So is there a team that either of you want to start off with, bring to the table, that you think they're a move or two away from taking that next level for the 2023 season?
Well, what is the next level in your mindset? It's a non-playoff team making the playoffs, or a playoff team winning that next game, or a Super Bowl contender actually winning the Super Bowl?
I just assume that it's any team that's not the Chiefs to try and win a Super Bowl, or to try and get. I mean, the Chiefs are at that level now. 31 other teams want to be at that level.
Yeah.
It's what
they need to
like
make that next step.
In theory, it is that, Rick. But it's also, if your definition of it is they've made the playoffs 2 years in a row now, that's not bad. But they need to take it to that next step. Like before, we learned that he was a terrible human being. Deshaun Watson and Bill O'Brien in Houston, I was saying for a long time they need to get rid of Bill O'Brien, because he was not going to be the head coach that had the scheming in mind to compete with the top of the AFC. Now, little did we know he was also a terrible general manager, but ipso facto, to each their own. Even take away the GM role for him, he was not he was never going to be the head coach that Houston was going to make the AFC title game with. He just wasn't.
Right.
If blowing a 24-0 lead was not the biggest indicator of that. So
didn't they make an AFC title game?
No, they never did. That 24 point blown lead was the AFC divisional round.
No, but didn't they make an AFC
title
game and lose? Yeah,
the Texans. No.
The Jaguars made. The Jaguars made a championship game, not the Texans.
Yeah. So, like a team, and again, this, if you want to go by the definition that I kind of said, or if there's a definition that, like, if there's a way you want to define it that you think is similar way, have at it. But is there any team either you want to bring to the forefront of this conversation?
So a lot of these teams that we've spoken about, or that are a move away, or a couple moves away, I think it all stems from the quarterback move. So I want to try and go a little bit outside of the realm here, which, if you know me, that's what I do, is I go for the random picks. As much as I like the Lions and the shout out there, we've talked about them a lot. You're right. So I want to go for a team that's a little bit off the beaten path here. And it is odd to think of this team as off the beaten path, but let's talk about Pittsburgh. Let's talk about the Steelers, because if you think about it, depending on how things shake out, they could be the second team in the AFC North behind Cincinnati. So what separates them from a team that is second place, nice season, or a second place wild card with Trubisky or Pickett as their starting quarterback? The thing is the line. They've got to figure out and fix both their offensive and defensive line. Offensive line more priority-wise, and this is a big key for a lot of teams. It doesn't help you if your offensive line cannot block a defense. Now, sure, Joe Burrow got to a Super Bowl last year. He was knocked down 81 times. That's not ideal. You want to keep your quarterback upright and on both of his feet, or one foot if you want to play off your back foot. So for the Steelers, I think, yes, there's a lot of different ways they can look through. I think their defense, too. I think they're losing Larry Ogunjobi, and Devin Bush, I think, is a free agent, too. So there's potential for them to draft some guys. But keep in mind this. The Steelers have 3 picks in the first 2 rounds. Because remember, they've got their first and their second, and they've got the pick that they gave for Chase Claypool, which they got from the Bears. So they've got the 32nd overall pick because the Dolphins and Stephen Ross, tampering again on my phone. So they've got, basically, if you want to look at that 2 first-round picks. Now, they could, in theory, if their first one, go with, like I said, an offensive lineman or an offensive output there. But the second pick overall that they have could be one of these younger, hungrier linebacker cores, or one of these edge guys. There's a lot of talk about, and you'll hear names like this all throughout the draft. Jack Campbell out of Iowa, who's been a very strong linebacker. Andre Carter II from West Point, who's one of the best defensive ends in the country. I think there's a chance that Pittsburgh is a couple of those moves away, bringing in younger guys and, salvaging up what they have on the offensive line to go from being a team that just missed the playoffs but still got Mike Tomlin a winning season to making the playoffs and being a really threatening team in the AFC, one of these possible upsets, if you're not careful, Pittsburgh's going to sneak up on you because that's just seemingly what the Steelers do. So I think they're a team that's off that beaten track because you're not going to talk about them for a quarterback because they're set. They drafted Kenny Pickett last year. They've got Mitch Trubisky. The only question they have a quarterback is, does Mason Rudolph stay as the third? And take it or leave it. But, that's the real question is can they fix the offensive and defensive line? And can that be a big part of them moving forward? I think it's a very interesting question for them because they, like I said, if Lamar Jackson's to stay in Baltimore, they're the number 2 seed in that AFC North. No question in my mind.
Yeah. I like it.
I'm gonna go off the beaten path as well. I'm gonna ignore the obvious answer with my boys, and I'm gonna say it's the Green Bay Packers. And it's not the move that you think it's going to be. Look, Aaron Rodgers is who he is. And if they're talking about restructuring, there's no way you come out of an Aaron Rodgers trade at the same level of quarterback. It's just an astronomically unlikely idea. And you had a really good defense this year. They were marred with injuries, but they played well throughout the season. They kept you in a lot of games. The issues for me, for the Packers, are their offensive line and their wide receiver. And, if you really wanted to make the move, I would say maybe let's get some cap space cuts. Let's draft linemen. And the move they need to make is they need to trade for T. Higgins. He's an impending free agent. There's lots of talks of him moving on because there's not going to be the cap space. If you're going to sign someone, unfortunately, it's obviously going to be Jamar over T. Higgins, who by no stretch of the imagination does not deserve. He absolutely deserves the money wherever he can get it. I'd love for him to stay in the Bengals, but it's not realistic. And if they really need that guy, let's go get Aaron Rodgers a legitimate threat. And T. Higgins can be that guy, and he can immediately make an impact on that team. You don't even need to necessarily trade some of your own guys. Alan Lazard is a free agent. Bakhtiari might end up being a cap casualty because of his injury history. They can free up some cap space, draft a receiver, maybe give him 2 2s and negotiate a long-term deal for T. Higgins and, go out there and see if Aaron Rodgers can win another Super Bowl because, 12 years ago, I think it was 12 years ago, Aaron Rodgers won his first Super Bowl. Yeah. And we were all sure that this guy was going to dominate the league for years to come. And he has those individual accolades, but it's weird to me that Aaron Rodgers only won 1 Super Bowl. He just seems like one of those guys that should have won at least 2, maybe 3 in an era that guys were doing that. So I would take a stab at as much as I'd love for the Jets to get him. If you're a Packers fan, even with all the BS and the darkness retreats and the celebrity dating life and me, let's have Aaron Rodgers retire as a Packer and let's win another Super Bowl and let's send him off the right way, the Packer way. This is not the Packers. For as long as I can remember, the Packers have been a gold standard in this league, and it just kind of seems like it's kind of crumbling in front of our eyes. Let's go out there. Let's make a good move. Let's see if we can trade for a legitimate asset in T. Higgins. The other guys will be fine. Christian Watson and Romeo Doubs, whatever his name is, as a number 2 and 3 guy.
They would benefit from a T. Higgins.
They Absolutely. Would be great. They already restructured Aaron Jones. Aaron Rodgers has said he's willing to restructure his contract for the right situation. Why wouldn't it be Green Bay?
Yeah. I also think you mentioned the defense there, Justin. I will say one thing that I know, I've heard Packers fans talk about is that they want more pass rush. You can use that first round pick on a pass rusher this year in the draft. Their pass, aside from Rashawn Gary, the pass rush wasn't great last year.
Yeah, well, Rashawn Gary also did get hurt mid-season. He was having an MVP caliber season, and a lot of people were talking to him. He looked like he might be a challenger for the sack title this year, and he did get hurt. I think it was like week 8 or 9.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, their pass rush was not the same because nobody was doubling Rashawn Gary. You know what I mean? So it's something that I think might fix itself. Look, I'd never say don't go out and get more pass rush. You get a pass rusher, absolutely. But if you have Rashawn Gary back and you have some of those linebackers healthy that can kind of blitz out of nowhere because they were really banged up at linebacker 2 last year, I don't think it's their biggest problem. I think they got to protect Aaron Rodgers, who is still a Green Bay Packer as of right now, and get Aaron Rodgers some receivers, and you're a contender again.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, that's why I know the ticker says a move, but really it's multiple moves, like Rick mentioned with the offensive and defensive line. I'm saying, like, I agree.
There's never a team that's just one move away.
Yeah,
but unless you're like the Chiefs, apparently.
Yeah.
But like, yeah.
And that one move is serious, Tony. Who knew?
I was going to say the Eagles, but the Eagles made a lot of good moves this offseason. So they were more than the AJ Brown move. It seems like the move, but let's not underestimate the Bradbury signing, the Chauncey Gardner-Johnson trade. I mean, even signing guys like Hassan Reddick and Ndamukong Suh in the middle of the year.
Mm-hmm. Drafting Jordan Davis for the future as well.
The thing is, too, that as you mentioned it, like Cincinnati on their side of the ball, if they do trade away T. Higgins, they've got a potential to draft a wide receiver in the first round. And there's good talent in the first round there that they can replace T. Higgins with. Jalen Hyatt out of Tennessee is a guy they can get. Isaiah Flowers out of Boston College. So there's talent there. It makes sense for Cincinnati, too, because you're right. There's no way you're going to be able to pay all those guys the money that they deserve. And
you're probably going to have to cut Joe Mixon here in another year or two because Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase's deals are going to be due.
Joe Mixon, I think, is also one of those guys that, I mean, if he has the season that he had this year, realistically, you might end up thinking of cutting him because he wasn't ultra productive throughout the year. I know he had that one crazy game where he had like 200 yards and 6 touchdowns, but for the most part, his yards per carry were really low this year. I know they had some struggles with their offensive line, but he seems like one of those guys that his contract will be up around that time and would come back at a discount to stay. I mean, obviously not too big of a discount. They got to pay him what he's worth, but he would stay at a discount to stay with guys like Jamar Chase and Joe Burrow so he could finish out his career and have a legitimate shot at contending.
Right, and it wouldn't necessarily be a drop-off for Cincinnati because they have Samaje Perine, I think, as their number 2 running back, right? So it wouldn't really be a drop-off for them if they had to cut Mixon or they had to give Mixon to another team, I think it would work out for them too. I think one other move that I think has to be discussed, and I'm going to go back to the AFC North, and it's Baltimore. Mm-hmm. They have to get a wide receiver.
I was thinking
in free agency or the draft. Or a tight end.
3 wide receivers.
They do, but you need to have something.
You need to start with Justin. You need to start with 1 before you get to 2 and 3.
Or you know what? You need to hire a brand new training staff.
Yeah. Who are you signing in free agency? I mean, this class of they're all professional players, but I mean, it's headlined by Alan Lazard. There's not a ton of wide receiver talent this year. If there was a year to go out and get wide receivers, they missed it. If there was a year to go out and draft wide receivers, it was the 2 years before that, frankly. So there's lots of things that they could have done to get Lamar help. It kind of it feels like it's time. As much as you don't want to say it, Lamar looks good in purple. Don't get me wrong. He should be a Raven for life. He's already earned that distinction on that team. They didn't do him any favors. And if I'm Lamar, I think you got to turn around and try not to look at it with rose-colored glasses. Yeah, they're the team that drafted you, but they're also the team that got you injured 2 years in a row, so you didn't finish out the season. You haven't been able to play in the playoffs the last 2 years because they're not doing you favors with their play calling, and they're not doing your favors signing the correct players to help you out. So it's
they've also lost some guys
on those legs, and they're almost pulling an RG3 here. They're almost pulling a Washington, and they're going to run him into the ground. That's not what's best for Lamar.
Yeah. The team that I was thinking of,
guaranteed.
Right. The team that I was thinking of, Rick, and the part of this is a little bit tricky because this team needs to solidify what their plan is going forward with quarterback first, but it's the Giants, funny enough, who we mentioned. I think the Giants need to get, the defense, I'm not saying is perfect. I think the defense could use a little bit of work, but I think the Giants need to get the wide receiver core is terrible. And I know we're talking about, yes, Daniel Jones had a better season last year. Daniel Jones had a mistake-free season. Daniel Jones had a relatively efficient season. Daniel Jones was not a world beater last year. And yes, I understand the idea of, yes, he can run with his legs, but at the end of the day, if he doesn't have weapons to throw to, it doesn't matter. He needs to be able to throw it to a competent guy. Now, have I been hard on Daniel Jones in the past? Yes. Will I be hard on Daniel Jones in the future? Absolutely. But I'm a fair man. like I said, Iron Fist, Velvet Glove, boys. Like, he needs a wide receiver to work with. Kenny Galladay is not that. You can actually cut Kenny Galladay. This is the first year they could cut Galladay and actually get a net savings on the cap hit, on the cap save versus.
Cut, I believe.
Yeah.
What happened?
It will be cut this year.
They're and that's an extra $7 million on their cap, which they were already close to 40 mil of cap space. So now you add an extra 7 mil. That's more money to play with. I think. I'm not saying this is the guy, because you mentioned T. Higgins. I think a lot of teams are going to be on the T. Higgins sweepstake, Justin. That's the thing. Like, I think T. Higgins.
Absolutely.
T. Higgins is going to be very competitive. Cincinnati, we're talking about Cincinnati might find their replacement for T. Higgins this year or next, because they're going to get legit draft capital for T. Higgins. Like, I know he's not on the caliber of what A.J. Brown and Tyreek Hill and Devontae were last year, but he is that next, where it's like he's a bona fide number 2. And if you want to try and make your number 1, I mean, give the kid a chance. You'll never know.
He's good enough to be a number 1. I just think that, I mean, look, he's been splitting targets with Tyler Boyd and Jamar Chase damn near his whole career.
Right. No, I'm agreeing with you. I'm just saying
good numbers. The point
I
think he's got the ability to be a number 1.
Right, I agree. I'm just saying, people will always say, well, he was the number 2 next to so-and-so. But you need to give him the chance to be the number 1. Let him see. And I think, T. Higgins sweepstake is going to be big. So I could see the Giants being in that sweepstake. I know he's older. I know this guy is older, but I think he's going to get moved, because you mentioned him earlier. DeAndre Hopkins, to me, is getting traded. It's just a matter of where.
Yeah.
And for all you want to say, losing time due to suspension last year, and I think the year before that was maybe a little bit of an injury bug to him. And let's be real here. Cliff Kingsbury in that Cardinals offense is just it was a joke. So why not put DeAndre Hopkins on a team where he could be that blanket for your quarterback? I'm not saying that. Yeah. I'm not saying that scheme wise. I'll admit this. I'm no master of the scheme. I'm not saying DeAndre Hopkins and Brian Daboll is a match made in heaven. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Who knows? But I think you need to make. I think the Giants need definitively a number 1 wide receiver in that offense, because I've made this comparison before. If they go into this season and they still have Daniel Jones and Saquon, but they didn't get Daniel Jones any receiving help, they're going to take a step back, because you can only get away with that game plan for so long. We talked about how they were like you mentioned it, Rick, how you try to keep going when you have lightning in the bottle. Are we going to forget the fact that lightning can hurt you as well? If the Giants come in with the same exact team next year, they're going to take a step back, because the NFL is going to figure it out.
Well, here's the funny part of that question, too, that we've all kind of forgotten, and it's fair to say we've forgotten about it, because I forgot about it, too. There are 2 Giants receivers who are unrestricted free agents going into the season. Richie James is one, and you can take him or leave him. But here's the $1 million question for the Giants. What do you do with Sterling Shepard? Because,
he's been rumored to be traded or cut for the last 2-3 years. I don't think that makes a difference.
Which if you think about it, then that is a $10 million take off the books. That being said,
you give those $10 million to T. Higgins. What are we talking about now?
That being said, if Sterling Shepard, he tore his Achilles in week 3. If he's a guy that you still have faith in, do you try and restructure his deal to keep him around for a short term for less money that will allow you to get a guy like a Hopkins, or maybe pair him with a Lazard if you wanted to, or if you're really stupid, go for Nelson Aguilar, which you should never do in any situation whatsoever.
I don't think they will.
No, but I mean that's the thing. We talked about. Yes, you were absolutely right. The Giants had no receivers. They did have a 1. He was hurt in week 3, because Sterling Shepard was their number 1. And then there's Isaiah Hodgins.
There's a massive difference between having your own personal number 1 and getting that number 1.
I agree with you 100%. But what I'm saying to you also is that this is it's an interesting question mark, because if he stayed healthy, and it was a huge if and it didn't happen, but if he stayed healthy, you could be going into the season saying, well, Jones, Barkley, or Shepard. If Shepard had a great season, who are you paying of the 3? Can you afford to keep all 3 of them? And obviously the Achilles injury took us out of that conversation, but let's run down that rabbit hole for a minute. If Shepard had stayed fully healthy and he was there for them for a full season and caught 70 passes and had 8 touchdowns and made Daniel Jones a better quarterback than as good of a quarterback as he was, and helped diversify that offense even further.
70 catches, 8 touchdowns is good, but that's not not league-wide number 1.
But those would be career highs for him, is what I'm saying. And he's been injury prone, sure, but he also has been in offenses that featured Odell. So he was not the number 1 target. If he became the number 1 target, and again, this was a Giants offense that relied heavily on Daniel Jones's legs, and they did on throwing the ball consistently. So it's an interesting because wide receiver to me is a very interesting discussion mark too, because you've got a lot of younger receivers who had decent enough years. Keep in mind, DJ Chark was on a 1-year deal with the Lions.
Yeah.
And I would be safe to say that because they traded away Hawkinson, which may go down as one of the stupidest trades of 2022, you could argue they need to keep DJ Chark around because that's a 3-headed monster wide receiver for them. So as interesting as the quarterbacks are, Batman needs his Robin. You got to have a good wide receiving core or a wide receiving core that you can make better in order to win in this league.
Yeah, for sure. Like it's just interesting, and I know a lot of this is very like we need to see these teams make these moves. Like some of these, like I mentioned the Giants, but they need to figure out the quarterback situation. But I think the idea is worth bringing up because while Justin's point is correct that you need to make a lot of different moves, there's one or two that will always stand out above the rest. And I think it is worth noting for these teams, like what can they do to take their organization, at least in theory, to that next level. I don't have a team for either of these guys, but I do want to bring them up because they've both been in the news just the last 48, 72 hours. Bobby Wagner was released by the Los Angeles Rams. It was a mutual parting of ways. And I sent you guys the screenshot of it yesterday. Jalen Ramsey is reportedly on the outs in LA, apparently. Is there a team that you think would massively – maybe Bobby Wagner easier because you don't have to give up any picks in a trade for him. You could just sign him to a straight contract. Is there any team that off the top of your guys' head that you guys should think immediately go for Jalen Ramsey or Bobby Wagner right now?
I mean, Bobby Wagner's case is interesting because the Seahawks are probably the front runners to get him, and it would be a nice little fit. But you know who needs some help on the defensive end? You know who was fraudulent last year and might need a good linebacker in their stead? Yeah. Minnesota Vikings. Minnesota would be a very good landing spot for him because I think, there were a lot of questions, and you saw with this team, they were really good on offense, but when they were bad, their defense was exposed mightily.
Yeah.
And having a guy who maybe his best days are behind him, but he's still got very good days in Bobby Wagner. Maybe having a guy like that be the heart and soul of your defense in Minnesota could be an interesting little fact there. With Jalen Ramsey, I don't really know because, again, what are the Rams looking for? Are they looking to keep him because they want to be, stubborn about that? But also, is Jalen Ramsey overrated? I mean, he's an all-pro guy, but really, if you think about it, he hasn't been the guy that he was in Jacksonville when he was shouting Duval in the middle of the microphone. He hasn't been that guy, I think, on a more consistent basis. So the question is, do you really just want to give him a spot? I'll tell you a team that I think could really use him, or two teams I think could really use him. The Bengals could really use another corner, with Eli Apple being what he is.
Yeah.
And the Lions. The Lions need a good corner as well because as good as the Lions offense was last year, their defense was the number one in points allowed. You bring in Jalen Ramsey and hope that he recaptures some of his shutdown glory, you immediately got a good enough corner to pair with Jeff Okudah up there in Detroit. So I think those are two options there. But again, are the Rams really going to part with that much with Ramsey, and what can they get back from him is the question, because this is a team in the Rams that has basically nothing, on the defensive side. I mean, we don't really know what this Rams team is because, again, when you sell your soul for a Super Bowl, the repercussions of it are mighty bad. It's like that uphill climb in Dante's Inferno coming out of hell, it ain't pretty, but they don't write books about it because they ain't pretty. So
yeah. No, it's funny you mentioned the Bengals because I was actually thinking a very similar thing. I think the Bengals need to be in the market for a cornerback this offseason in some way, shape, or form to improve that secondary definitively. I was also actually partially thinking the Minnesota Vikings for Ramsey, funny enough, because they need a corner. Like that secondary was exposed several times last season. That secondary was young, and yes, they're going to be another year older, but that doesn't always mean they're going to all take that next step. Yeah, they're another year older, they're another year wiser, they're less wet behind the ears and all the sayings you want to say, but at the end of the day,
doesn't mean anything.
Doesn't mean anything. Like they'll be a little bit better, but how much better? That Minnesota Vikings defense collapsed at the end of the season when the Vikings needed them the most. It's definitely going to be the defensive side of the ball that they should focus on if we're talking about teams and what they should do per se. For the Philadelphia Eagles, I think we can all agree that for them, the key to them winning the Super Bowl next season is to make it when they're not using a brand new field of turf at that for the Super Bowl. And also, maybe don't hold / not hold Juju Smith-Schuster at the end of the game. But irregardless,
don't get caught.
Yeah, they'll get caught. But at the end of it, there are certainly some there are some teams here that we've just spoken about that taking that next step. It seems that it could be some maybe more obvious than others, some not so much. But I like the fact we went off the beaten path a little bit. I like the fact that we brought up some teams here that playoff contender, sure, maybe almost there. What could they do to take that next step? Because in theory, I think the uniqueness about what I loved about this postseason was that the Chiefs and the Eagles, it doesn't always happen where the definitive top two teams in the NFL meet for a season. The Eagles and the Chiefs were number 1 and 2 the entire year. And we don't always get that, which means that in theory, there's a little bit of room here for someone, if they make that move, these moves we're talking about, to go on a run. So that's why I bring this up as a topic for us, because you never know, man. The moves that these teams could make, the move that they make on March 17th, 18th, could be the guy that gets the interception to seal the game in the playoffs. The kid that they draft in the 6th, 7th round could end up winning the game, kicking the game-winning field goal to make it to the Super Bowl. You just never know. You really don't. And that's why NFL is so interesting, because 53 roster spots, one of those 53 could do something for you. And you never know. Now, typically, it's usually one of the main 22. But still, you never know when one of those 22, where they come from. They could come in free agency. They could come in the draft. They could come in undrafted free agency. Yeah, they could come in a trade. So that's the interesting part that I think was worth us bringing up here. But we're going to continue to talk to an extent because, guys, I kind of already said it. I gave the important dates before. Tag season is basically upon us. We're going to see a lot of guys get franchise tagged here in the coming days, in week and a half or so before the deadline. So I have a big list here of guys that could potentially get franchise tagged. A lot of them we've already brought up, so some of this conjecture we could go a lot quicker because of all the conversation we've had. But basically, it's tag, extension, or gone, basically, is the little game we're going to play here. I already forgot the name that I said in the text before, but it's tag, extension, or gone, basically. You want to say they leave via free agency or trade, up to you. But that's basically the game we're about to play with a list of guys that I have on me right here. And again, I'm not saying all these guys are going to get tagged. Maybe some of these teams just let these guys go. But these are the big names that people are bringing up for a number of teams here that expect them to be, at least a conversation minimum is going to happen for them tagging. So, boys, are we ready to begin?
Let's do it.
All right. First big name. We've talked about him so much. So let's get this one out the way. Lamar Jackson. Tag, trade, or no, tag, extension, or gone?
I mean, if they're smart, they'll extend him.
Yeah, but
I think they're going to tag him, but I don't think it's going to do anything for him. I think he'll.
Insane. So, because in theory, I'm assuming a lot of these players will end up being tagged, and then one or the other will happen.
I mean, no, some guys just take the tag and they only stay on the tag. No, some guys don't. Some guys just do stay on the tag.
The tag's like a qualifying offer in baseball in a way, right? It's a 1-year contract, or something, a show me contract. Yeah, I think Lamar Jackson knows that he's much more of a extension guy. I think if Baltimore will tag him, it's the smart thing to do. But I could see him leaving because I don't think he's going to want to play on a 1 year. Like what do I have to show you? I was an MVP. Why do I have to be tagged?
Yeah. Guys do play on the franchise tag for the year. Dalton Schultz just
did,
so
but
that's
guys
why
like Lamar Jackson.
Guys
like
Jackson don't.
But that's why you don't consider it for him. But some of these guys we may have to consider it for, depending on the situation.
So that's the thing. I think they tagged him, and then because they're not going to have a choice. If they don't tag him, he's going to leave.
Yeah.
So you tag him, and it gives you more time to sign that to give him that extension,
which they probably will. So
agreed.
Well, all right. Lamar was named numero uno. This is interesting here between these two. Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley. I'm putting them together here back to back because you can only use the franchise tag once. So in theory, only one of these guys could get tagged, or they could both just get extended, or one or both could be gone. What are we thinking with these boys?
So the problem is the quarterback franchise tag is $32 million. Running back tag is a lot less than that. I think the running back tag is 16, maybe 10, somewhere in that neighborhood. I think.
Yeah, so 10.5, I think.
So I think the smart play to do is to tag Saquon Barkley, because that way you can work on an extension for both of them. But if you have Barkley at least set, Barkley's been your main guy, so I think he's the guy that you tag. But I think they will end up extending both. But I think having one solved will probably be a little bit easier than trying to solve both if they don't tag either one of them at the same time.
You agree, Justin?
Yeah, that's the only way to do it, in my opinion. If you're not going to keep Saquon, I think that it might be worth moving on from Daniel Jones. I don't think you get the same production. You're not going to get the receiver production you were looking for in 1 year. I mean, Daniel Jones is one of those guys that he had a great year last year. I'm not going to sit here and say he was an MVP, but those receivers did him no favors. I mean, what they have 10 drops in that divisional game. They dropped so many open passes. So if you're not going to get Saquon back, Daniel Jones is a guy you're going to pay $35 million and you're going to have a full reset of your offense as opposed to having that Pro Bowl caliber running back. And it doesn't make sense to me to not just flat out start over. Let's take a down year. Let's draft a quarterback and let's build this thing the way it should be built.
Yeah, nice.
All right. That being said, though, yeah, I would do that.
Yeah.
Tag it.
All right, yeah. Jordan Poyer of the Buffalo Bills.
That's an interesting one.
If you need some context, he is from 31 years old and he played in 12 games last year, so he missed 5.
Because the question is for Buffalo, there's two questions. A, are they still in their Super Bowl or bust window? And B, is it Poyer or Tremaine Edmonds?
That's the thing. I was going to bring him up depending on your answer here.
That's the big question. You know what? I'm comfortable letting Poyer walk. I mean, I would work on tagging or extending Edmonds, but I'm comfortable letting Poyer walk because, I mean, I think I can get another safety or I can get other help in the secondary and free agency than I can with Jordan Poyer. I mean, as good as he was last year, he was 63 tackles. He had 4 picks. Like, you know, you could probably move on from him and get somebody else. I think Tremaine Edmonds is probably the better guy to tag in the scenario. I know Poyer is really the heart and soul at Bills D, but I think you can get away with moving on from him.
Yeah.
I might disagree. I mean, did White even play last year?
Tre'Davious White, I think he came in later in the season. I'll double check that.
I think they kept saying that he was going to come back, and then he never really did. I mean, Poyer's the guy that played well for them last year. I mean, if I was going to try and sign someone long term, I think I would go with Poyer. You know, names aren't everything. You have to go with production. And that being said, he was their best player on a secondary that didn't really play that well. That was one of their big Achilles heels. It was giving up big passes and allowing the run game to kind of set up that pass because the secondary had to stay forward. I would try and re-sign him. Obviously, I think that's the way to go. I think that's their best option. But, I mean, there's other issues that need to be addressed. They had good secondary play. A lot of young players that played well for them last year in the secondary. If they let him go, I think they'll survive.
Tre'Davious White did come back and play, I believe it was the final 6 games of last season, just for the context.
Played that many?
Yeah. It didn't feel like it. Trust me.
Definitely did not. Definitely did not.
Right. Evan Ingram.
Tag him.
Similar to Dalton Schultz.
What is the tight end franchise tag at?
14, I think. I think it's 14 million. Yeah, but you know what?
He had a career year, 73 catches, 766
and he came on strong. He was a big safety net for Trevor Lawrence down the stretch. I would do everything I can to keep him.
It's 11.5. Not 14.
I was going to say 14 is high.
Yeah,
at 11, I might franchise him and look to extend.
Yeah,
it depends on who else. Did they have? I think they had a defensive player that was a free agent this year also, though. That I don't know if I would use the franchise tag on a tight end.
Well, I would use the franchise tag on Ingram only because I don't know if that season was an aberration or not. And the thing is, too, if you tag Ingram and he stays for the year, you bring back Calvin Ridley to pair with Christian Kirk, Travis Etienne. You've got a full compendium of offensive weapons there. And if Ingram's really the answer at tight end, you lock him up long term. But tag him. What's the worst that could happen? You know.
You're right. I don't see anyone so unbreakable that they couldn't just franchise tag him. It's not like they were paying him that much less than what they are now.
Yeah.
Daron Payne of Rick's beloved Washington Commanders.
Whew, this is a tough one Because he was the guy that basically saved the Commanders on defense because Chase Young wasn't ready to come back, and then he came back. But Deron Payne was really good. He's also very young, too. He's 25 years old.
I would tag him because even if worst case, you get him just for, like, if you can only get him for the tag right now and you can't work out that long-term deal, maybe it works better because if you get your quarterback in the fold, you can revisit things with him next offseason.
I think you have to try and create a two-headed monster with Payne and Young on a defensive end.
Montez Sweat's there too, Rick.
Montez Sweat's there too, absolutely. I think you've got a chance to really reshape and make your defense really, really good if you have them. I tag him, but I would absolutely try and work out a long-term deal with him. I might even say let's try and work out the deal first. But the problem is with that, Deron Payne's a guy that's going to go. If he hits the open market, he's going to go. So do you tag him and lock him in and then extend him? Or if you can't come to an extension, he plays for a year, and then you revisit the extension all over again next year? I don't know. But I would try and keep him as much as I could. So I'd probably say, yes, tag him, but call the next day and say, okay, let's work on an extension.
Yeah.
Do what the Dolphins did with Xavier Howard. Even though it didn't work out this year, but do exactly that.
I mean, Xavier Howard was good for a little bit. He was. All right, 3 main names I really want to get to for us talking about, but let me go through. I want to say these are the last 2, mid-tier ones. Again, similar thing, same team. One of these guys got the franchise tag last season. I think the answer is obvious for him. It's the second guy who I want to have the conjecture about. Dalton Schultz and Tony Pollard. To me, Dalton Schultz, you let him walk. He didn't do anything to me to prove why I should give him an extension, and I'm not tagging him again. So I would let him walk.
I have been on the record saying you need to do whatever you can if you're the Dallas Cowboys to keep Tony Pollard, because let's be honest here, the bloom is worn off the rose that is Ezekiel Elliott. I think it's time to let him go because that's a big cap hit that you can absorb. I think you keep Tony Pollard and make him your number 1 feature. I agree with you that Dalton Schultz you can get rid of because why not? You can get a receiver in the draft if you want to. You can get a Dalton Schultz type or a tight end type. You can get a guy like a Luke Musgrave out of Oregon State as well. But Tony Pollard's the guy you got to hang on to. He was a difference maker, man. Yeah. Last year, he was incredible. And it's a shame that he got injured when he did because that really showed that without them, Dallas was a one-trick pony on offense. Honestly, a Cowboy being a one-trick pony is kind of hilarious. But regardless, Tony Pollard is the guy that has to be there. He is the guy that can really blossom in that system. I think you do whatever you can to hang on to him.
Justin, you agree?
Because
part of it is I'm assuming you're gonna. Well, Justin, I know you would cut Zeke and give Pollard whatever he would need.
Just financially, if, like I said, I think that they should try and restructure. I think having Zeke there benefits Tony Pollard, believe it or not. But that being said, if you're going to tag one of those guys, it's got to be Pollard. I mean, Schultz didn't have that great a season. I know a lot of people were disappointed by his performance this year, especially in the playoffs. But you got to go with Pollard. The offense went as Pollard went, especially down the stretch.
Tony Pollard was one of those guys where if you were betting on the team that Dallas was playing, and it was late in the game, and you needed the defensive stop to return the tide, you didn't want to stay in the hand of the ball at Tony Pollard because he was annoying. Because he would always get the first down. He'd always get more yards. He would always fight for more ground. There's a reason why he ended up with 1,000 yards rushing this year, which, absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah. All right. Big 3 time. These are the 3 biggest names that I personally think that, the conversation between, well, one of them I think is more likely they're going to be gone or not, but I still am going to mention the guy. These to me are the 3 biggest names where the idea of tag, extend, or gone is more relevant to these 3. Josh Jacobs of the Raiders.
The Raiders are stupid, so gone.
Okay, fair.
They'll tag him, I think.
Tag him? Do you think it could be a thing where they tag and trade him, assuming that he doesn't want to be there?
Yeah, I could see him being on another team next year for sure, but he's definitely going to hit the franchise tag. I mean, there's no way they can afford to let him go. And if they do, God help that team.
Yeah, right. It's a rough times to the very least. He's also like he's probably like it's him and Devontae Adams are the two guys there that are like the linchpins to wanting to try to get a quarterback to Vegas. Hey,
Well,
you got a
I
shiny
also-
number one receiver and a really good running back.
I also think this: if the Giants, if Barkley isn't there, the Giants are going to make a play for Josh Jacobs. So if I'm the Raiders, I would just lock him in. But the Raiders, like I said, are stupid, so they're going to let him go.
All right. On ironically enough, the last two teams of the season that made it to the last game, one player on each of those teams. Chauncey Gardner-Johnson of the Eagles.
Ted.
Tag.
Extend.
I agree.
Again, if you're tagging someone, the idea in my mind is to extend him.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would think so. Well, the only problem is that James Bradbury, I think, is also a candidate for a tag.
Bradbury played
older.
well this year. He was a good piece. They would love to re-sign him, I'm sure.
Right.
Chauncey Gardner-Johnson was the guy there at cornerback.
Chauncey Gardner-Johnson's only 26 years old.
Yeah.
If that's what you're looking up, Rick. He's only 26.
Bradbury's young too, isn't he?
Bradbury's
I
pretty
thought-
young.
I thought he was 30.
Well, he's still young for a cover corner.
I mean, okay, fair shout, but 4
Yeah.
years is the difference on the NFL body.
True. I mean, I wouldn't even chance the tag. I would say you tag Bradbury and you work on an extension for Gardner Johnson, because don't even go into that realm. Like, just extend him.
I agree.
I mean, look, if one is more likely to stay than the other, then obviously you tag the one that's not going to stay. That's the whole point of the tag, is to say, hey, you're not going anywhere. Let's work this out.
Hmm.
If you had to choose between the two, I'm choosing Chauncey Gardner-Johnson. I mean, he had a great year this year.
Mhm.
He's a young guy who has got a ton of NFL experience. He's been in that annoying corner for years now. I mean, how many times have you seen?
Yeah.
I mean, even his own teammates would get in his face in practice. He's the quintessential pain in the ass cornerback.
Yeah. And he backed it up this year with interceptions. I believe he had 6. So
it's not a stat that I would sign someone for, though.
I mean, some NFL GMs are a little bit archaic, Justin. They see 6 interceptions and they're going to hand you $80 million.
I love the ball skills, and it's very important, but it's kind of almost like a luck stat. Like, yeah.
No, I agree.
You need the quarterback to throw it that many times that way in your direction and be able to make, you know what I mean? It's not a reason for a guy to get paid $15 million.
Justin, I agree, but do remember, this is the NFL. These GMs, they like their numbers. Last guy, Orlando Brown Jr.
I think I might let him walk.
Yeah. Let him walk.
What do you want to tag him?
If you thought it was necessary, but he's a little older. It wouldn't be his first franchise tag. I'd see if I could sign him. Listen, we could pay you. You'd be on a 2-time winning Super Bowl team in the past 5 years. If that's not good enough for you, I got other things that I need to worry about.
He's 26, Justin. I don't know about the little.
Is that young?
Yeah.
You
want to amend the statement?
Maybe.
No, I think if you're Kansas City, you can figure out something else. You don't. Orlando Brown can go. I mean,
really?
I think you could figure out another option that's there. You can also figure out another way to draft a lineman or groom another lineman to take his place. I don't think
will they be 4-time Pro Bowler good?
Well, but for an offensive lineman, that's kind of he wasn't a Pro Bowl selection as a number one. He must have been an alternate, I would think.
Well, I mean, he made what? He's been a chief.
So did Tyler Huntley.
Okay, ignoring your Tyler Huntley thing there. He was on the Baltimore Ravens to start his career. I believe he made 2 of them with Baltimore, and then I want to say 1 or 2 with Kansas City.
You can't ignore
He's
Tyler
a 4-time
Huntley.
Pro Bowler.
He's omnipresent.
You can very much ignore Tyler Huntley, Rick.
He's a free agent.
No, I know All Pro is a bit more important than Pro Bowl, but I still think there's some value there. Even if it's a dollop compared to the American dollar, there's something there.
I still think that there's a different way that they can work on the offensive line than tagging Brown. I think you can let him walk.
I'm either tagging or extending him because we saw what happened when you didn't have the best possible offensive line in the Super Bowl a few years ago. Why would I want to lose anything in my offensive line?
No,
Why would I want to lose?
They shouldn't keep him. I'm just saying I don't know if I would tag him.
So either extend him or let him walk.
Yeah.
Fair enough. But Rick didn't even hesitate. He's like, yeah, get rid of him.
Goodbye.
Yeah, okay. All right, fair enough. Fair enough. Fair enough. So
Spicy takes over here, man.
Yeah, clearly. Well, I'm calling actresses that I've never watched one of their movies B-list. So we're all about the spiciness.
Yeah, that's rough, man.
I don't.
You need to apologize to Shailene Woodley.
I'm not.
She was beautiful in the movie I haven't seen.
Yeah, I was gonna say, give me like her top 3 movies in the catalog, and I'll reconsider it.
I will do just that while you spout some other nonsense.
Okay, Justin. I have listed a lot of names. Is there one guy I haven't mentioned that you think is probably going to end up getting tagged for a team to try to keep long term, or do you think I've hit on all the big pieces? Is there like a guy that I'm forgetting? Is there who's the most notable New York Jet that could get the franchise tag this year, Justin? For the heck of it, since we only have one Jets fan on this podcast now.
That's true.
That could get tagged.
Is there any Jet worthy of the franchise tag?
Quentin Williams.
Quentin Williams.
Is he eligible?
I think he's a free agent.
I think Quincy Williams is eligible for tag, but I don't know about Quentin.
Quincy's the linebacker. Quentin is
right. Yeah.
I assume he's eligible. I don't know.
I haven't seen anything on him being eligible for.
Well,
a tag.
I think that the idea is that they're going to work out the long-term deal.
I think so too. But
if there was a Jet that was going to be a free agent that is eligible and should get that kind of treatment, it is Quentin Williams. I don't know if he's eligible.
From what I'm seeing, he's on his 5th year.
This is his 5th year?
Yeah, his 2023 is his 5th year option for $9.59 million base salary.
Okay, so no.
There's nobody. I mean, Quincy Williams is a guy who's a possibility. Sheldon Rankins was okay, but none of those guys are tag worthy. They're just not. I mean, there are teams you can kind of go up and down the list and look at these guys and say, there's nobody here that I need to tag or need to really work on that stuff. Like it doesn't hurt you not to use a tag in that regard. So I don't think the Jets need to tag anybody this year. Next year, different discussion.
Yeah. That's why I asked, because some teams, they just never use the franchise tag. The franchise tag is optional. It's not required. So that's why I asked, like, some teams just don't use it. It's not worth it. Or maybe they'll franchise tag their kicker. Who knows? Yeah. That's always fun when a kicker or punter gets franchise tag.
Very accurate.
So there's that. All right, before we get to the rain podium, what is Shailene Woodley's movie catalog that I need to apologize for?
And our stars.
Yeah, C-list. Anyways.
And the Divergent series.
You're making me want to send her down to D-list. All right.
There's also in Snowden.
C-list.
Okay.
I'm not impressed. All right, let's get to the last one. We just had some hot takes, so let's go to a segment that combines the hot takes and the ranting, ladies and gents. It's the highlight of the show. It's the main event of the show every single dang week because this man is the show. It's Podfather Rick's Rantin' Rick's Roast from Podium. Let's do it.
She was also an extra in the Black Eyed Peas music video for "Where Is the Love." I'm just saying.
You're not helping her case at all.
I'm not helping. I'm just telling you what she's been a part of. So there you go. I mean, listen, if you're in a Black Eyed Peas music video, that's fine enough as it is, I think.
At the end of the day, I was being nice by saying B-list. I think that's what you're telling me here. I was being too kind.
Sure, I suppose.
Oh no, Courtney Cox was in Bruce Springsteen's music video. She became an A-list actor.
Yeah. Not everyone can be Kathy Griffin. Anywho, backing on, moving to somebody else. Okay. My podium this week. I wrote everything down, by the way, of course. Just okay. Let's start with number 3. Marvel, you've jumped the shark. We're on phase 5 of the Avengers series, and I could really care less. I think nobody really could care about any of that's going on. I think we're all past it. Now, we had our run with the Avengers with Iron Man and Hulk and Thor. And if you're telling me that now I have to root for Groot to, save the day, I'm not going to be a part of it. So I'm going to pass on that. And please stop making movies. It's just, it behooves you to stop making movies now. It's not good. My number 2, I don't know why this is a thing. And supposedly it's to promote, people to people and peace and cooperation. But why do we have sister cities and sister towns in the world where we have, there were towns all over the country that have a sister city in like Japan or France or Germany, or if you're Greenport, Long Island, your sister city is in Romania, and apparently you traded, for spices to have one of your retired ambulances go over to Romania and, be in there like their ambulance corps. Why do we need this? What have you not seen the news? We're past brotherhood and sisterhood nowadays. I think we're done with all of that. So I don't really know why we still have these things. If you want to be cooperative, I don't know, go read a book or something like that. I think that's a little more cooperative than that. Number one for me, I was going to talk about my 30-page literature review that I'm currently doing. Why do I need to review so much literature? It's not ideal for me. I was going to talk about delivery drivers and delivering packages, seeing if Justin had some problems with his delivery today, but apparently he did not. And so therefore, that leads me to my number one rant of the week. You thought you could escape last week, didn't you? But there's an old saying that goes, sometimes a team or a person that doesn't need to be spoken about knows what they did wrong. I'm coming for you, Duncan! You're number one, because you know what? Yeah, maybe I didn't talk about you last week, but you know what you did wrong. You know that you've done wrong constantly, all the time. I have no basis to back this up on, but you're just terrible. You are terrible, Duncan. So listen, take it from me. You suck. Very simple, nice and easy. And Adam Rank, shush. It's not your time yet. Go away. St. Louis Battlehawks 2-0 in the XFL. Woohoo! Go Battlehawks! That's what I got.
There's our XFL mention on the show here. So that works out lovely.
Hey, listen, two come from behind wins using the quirky XFL rules to their advantage. I love it.
Yep,
it's great.
Speaking of quirky, great way to describe this episode. Great way to describe the show. And we're done here, ladies and gentlemen. Guys, thank you so much for joining us on yet another lovely weekend of the show. And I mean, I think I could confidently say this because I think the boys basically agree with me. This, I think, is the perfect way to wrap up season 1 of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. Doing it better than, other entertainment groups do. But in all seriousness, guys, with the end of the season and still a little bit of time here, we're basically waiting on news. We're going to take a little bit of a hiatus here when it comes to doing the show in terms of a weekly bit. I mean, we'll be back. Don't you worry. You'll see these lovely mugs soon. All of us will have more hair by the time we do the next episode because time does that to you. But we're going to wait here a couple weeks before we get on to the next step, before we come back on again to talk some more. And I think it's just going to be better overall. We're going to be able to react to who got franchise tagged and who didn't, who got extended, who's allegedly going to be, potentially traded at that point, who has been traded at that point, where have guys signed, what finality and clarity we're going to have. We're going to have a whole shebang of a rundown for you the next time we hop on. But for now, we say a very temporary goodbye. But thank you all so much for joining us for the first 48 plus episodes of the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast. That wraps up season 1. I hope there's a way to make a little thing on YouTube, a playlist season 1, season 2. While I figure out those machinations on that end and also get access to the YouTube. That just about wraps it up for this episode of the show here. Thank you all so much for joining us this week. We will be back relatively soon. We're not going to be gone for too long. We know you people will miss us if we are gone for too long at the end of the day, because the Sports Agents of Chaos podcast, our little troublesome trio here that loves to talk football on a weekly basis. We're here to talk football. We're here to have fun, talk football, and cause just a little bit of chaos. And more chaos will be coming your guys' way very soon. Thank you all so much for joining us this week, and we will see you guys very soon.
Shailene Woodley's a 7-time Teen Choice Award winner.
F-list.